Welcome back to the channel. This is Trinity Storm and you are watching third part of What If Naruto Only Has Kyuubi's Chakra, not his soul. If you enjoy this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
Face to face, both fighters were engrossed in the usual Hyuga air of superiority. When Hinata announced the start of the match, Neji allowed a smirk to creep onto his face while he looked arrogantly at his now confident cousin. "You should give up, Hinata. Sama, you know you are no match for me," Neji yelled with assurance as he went into the Hake position. Neji taunted Hinata once more after she straightened up. Neji, who was determined to kill the girl, said, "You should stop being a ninja altogether. It will only end badly for you, and besides, could you live with yourself, if your ineptitude cost the clan its honor, or worse, our birthright?" Hinata boldly announced, "No, I couldn't live with myself, that's why I'll make sure to prove right here and now that I am worthy of the title heiress to the Hyuga clan," erasing Neji's smug smile. The pale boy charged wildly, closing in for the strike without even turning on his Byakugan. He only activated the all-seeing eyes when his arm was halfway out, at which point he discovered that the Hinata he had been battling was a mere Bunshin. Neji wondered when Hinata had the time to perform the hand seals for Bunshin in front of him, or the several dozen that were now filling his vision, as he ran his hand through the chakra projection. As one of Hinata's Bunshin said to Neji, "You look confused, Neji.ni.san. Maybe if you weren't so sure that I would crumble at a few harsh words and get so hot-headed when I tell you off, then you'd realize that my teacher is Konoha's genjutsu mistress." A vein of rage appeared on the teenager's forehead. Neji, who only hit clones repeatedly, was slowly growing more and more irritated as he drove his hand through yet another clone. The layers of chakra projections continuously in its field of vision were beginning to confuse even his Byakugan, which ordinarily could distinguish a Bunshin from the real thing. When Hinata emerged from beneath the ground and struck the boy's chin with a forceful blow, Neji screamed in exasperation as his palm struck yet another projection. The chakra behind it was more than enough to send Neji airborne, even though none of the targets were for any tenketsu. He then had to use more chakra to regain his balance. When he landed, Neji wiped the blood from his chin and gave Hinata a sour look as she stood motionless, preparing to move on. Confident that she wasn't a Bunshin, Neji rushed forward once more. However, as his palm made contact with Hinata, it fell through her form once more. This time, however, the Hyuga heiress responded with a side punch to the face. Neji caught the entire thing in the corners of his Byakugan, but the blow knocked him sideways. "How in the hell?" the boy exclaimed, looking utterly bewildered and for once losing his sense of superiority. "Simple, ever since I graduated from the academy, I have been working on genjutsu with Kurenai Sensei to better round myself out on the battlefield. As a result of this, I developed a whole new branch of Juken which I like to call Hake Shinkaru. 8 Trigrams Mirage," Hinata said before advancing. As the girl gave her cousin a sound beating without ever using Juken, Hinata's Bunshin took the brunt of Neji's blows, weaving through them like a choreographed dance. In order to seal off 10 distinct tenketsu at once, Hinata ended her barrage with a low sweep that knocked Neji sideways before slamming all 10 of her jutesaki, charged fingers into Neji's stomach. With a sick thud, the boy bounced off the wall and then landed in a clumsy form on the solid concrete. As the boy slowly pulled himself to his feet, Neji pushed the idea of slowly destroying his cousin from his mind and concentrated on completely destroying her for bringing him this far. Neji sank low into the Hyuga's renowned Hake stance and began a lethal advanced Juken dance with the clan's heiress, bringing them both to the verge of collapse. Though it appeared impressive, the damage the chakra bursts were causing to the surrounding arena dispelled any idea that either side was joking. Both sides exchanged thrusts, swipes, and jabs, with neither landing more than a passing blow. Hinata sent Neji flying towards the arena walls after slamming her foot into her cousin's torso. However, the Hyuga prodigy recovered quickly and managed to stick himself to the wall while counter-attacking with a Hake Kusho burst. Before Hinata could react, the chakra beam reached her and hurled her into the arena walls as well. Hinata prepared herself for the next battle, sticking to the wall as elegantly as her cousin had, and looked up at the boy. Hinata and her cousin leapt into the air at the same moment as Neji, collided once in midair, and then bounced off the wall to begin again. After several rounds of touch and go, Hinata gradually gained the upper hand in the battle in the air. While Neji's blows were stronger, they were never more than a glance as the two played tit for tat in midair. Her feminine grace and light build gave her amazing agility, which was crucial in the air. Neji, who was getting bored with the game, filled all of his tenketsu with chakra before letting it all out in a mid-air kaden. With a single blow, Neji changed the outcome of the fight in his favor. Neji was now shielded by a wall of spinning chakra, but Hinata's aerial form was rapidly approaching an imposing wall of destruction. Instinctively, Hinata used her own Hake Kusho to propel herself to the side and out of the way of Neji's flying chakra fortress rather than using her own Kaden to take on Neji directly. Her strategy was successful, and Hinata was now ready for a massive counterattack. Using a Hake Kusho push to help her bounce off the wall again, Hinata flew twice as fast as usual in the direction of Neji's recuperating form. When Hinata's accumulated inertia led her to Neji's vulnerable form, her wall of defense, which had been a Kaden, quickly turned into an orb of destruction. Hinata collided with the earth beneath her, destroying all of the stone tiles beneath her and uplifting all of the tiles within 10 feet of the crash's epicenter. As she stood in the middle of the ring, breathing heavily and looking side to side while using her Byakugan to try to keep Neji out of her blind spot, her peers watched in wonder. Since she felt a powerful chakra push cushion her impact just before impact and another cylindrical force slid out from between her Kaden and the ground below, she was certain her cousin had survived that final technique. Neji had somehow used the Hake Kusho to slow her descent onto him by a split second, based on the two forces she felt and what she could see from her blurred Byakugan at the time. This allowed him enough time to spin his body into a Kaden and create another one with his free hand to propel him to the side. He successfully combined 3 advanced Juken techniques in quick succession, and it's possible that he invented a brand new technique entirely. It's obvious that Neji is the Hyuga's strongest member, but I can't lose here. As the dust from her impact settled and her cousin appeared, Hinata came to the conclusion that it was not in front of him. Though not as nuanced as the traditional Kawarimi, his escape strategy had done its job and then some, and Hinata's vicious attack had left Neji completely unharmed. Neji whispered, "That was a grave mistake, Hinata. Sama," loud enough for the heiress to hear. "And why is that, Neji?" Before assuming an unusually Hake stance, Neji yelled, "Because you have forced me to show you and all of those around us why the branch house is superior to the main house, and for once Daddy isn't here to save you." Unfazed by the boy's posture, Hinata attempted to mentally determine what it might be used for. Alright. Rather than using rapid, perplexing movements to close the distance as is customary in Hake technique, his feet are positioned closely together, almost as if he intends to launch himself at me. And like a bird ready to fly, both of his arms are spread wide behind him. That's it. However, Neji was already announcing his new method as soon as Hinata realized what he was going to do. Hake. Furatori no Furito, free bird's flight. Neji launched himself at Hinata like a bullet, twisting himself into a Kaden and pushing off the ground with both hands using twin Hake Kusho. Since the standard spherical technique transformed Neji into a flying drill similar to Kiba's Suga, it became even more lethal. But this technique was also a giant flying Juken strike, unlike Kiba's. Hinata shouted, "Hake! Jinsoku Shuin Sho, 8 trigrams. Swift Sealing Palm," in an attempt to use her best move to counter Neji's most recent move. Hinata felt her reserves dwindling as Neji approached, firing attacking bursts of chakra at the arrow of destruction. Although she made progress in slowing down Neji's attack, she would not be able to stop it, much less win the match, if she failed to hit him while he was spinning. As her strength failed her, Hinata thought, "I have enough strength for one more shot." She took aim and realized that her shot could penetrate Neji's defenses if she added spin in the same direction as Neji was spinning. But before she fired her final shot, she saw that the hole she had made would spin around in the Juken arrow he had made, landing on top of his heart. As Hinata stayed her blow and took full force of Neji's attack to the chest, she thought to herself, a deadly place to hit with Juken. Before she collapsed to her knees, dead, the shock of the Juken strike had broken her ribs and pushed blood from her punctured lung up into her mouth. The audience gasped in horror at what they saw, not thinking her own family could be so callous. As he lay on one knee, panting from exhaustion, Neji boastfully said, "See, I told you, Hinata. Sama, you should have quit while you were ahead. The match was predestined to be in my favor, and although you showed skills I could not foresee, they were useless in the face of fate." He forced his weary body to stand and look down on his wounded cousin, reverting to his typical smug demeanor. But rather than shattering his cousin, his smile only made her feel irritated and deeply sorry. "You don't get it, do you? What do you think this hatred for the main house will get you? Vengeance for your father's sacrifice? He was my uncle too. I miss him so much, especially after losing mother as well, but you seem to have your head so far up your ass that you can't even see that others around you are hurting just as much," Hinata replied, criticizing her cousin's conduct. Unfortunately, her words hit Neji harder than even the most well-aimed Juken blow. despite being barely audible above a whisper because of her deflated lung. When Neji roared back, "You say you're hurting? I'll show you true pain," he shocked everyone in Konoha by lunging at his helpless cousin. The target of the lethal Juken blow was Hinata's head, which serves as the chakra's control point. If struck, the victim would undoubtedly suffer severe pain and most likely die. Thanks to their quick reflexes, Hinata's friends above were able to get to her before the prodigal Hyuga below. With his left hand crackling crazily with surging chakra and his right hand holding a bone dagger aimed eye level with the pale Hyuga, Kimimaro stood imposingly in a plume of rising smoke in front of Neji. "Icily, I would advise against that Hyuga," said Kimimaro. He spoke in the same monotone, but his words were cold enough to freeze even Sasuke's most powerful Kaiden jutsu. Trained in the art of dick-headedness and intimidation, Neji was not at all put off. Neji threw back Kimimaro's remarks while also disparaging his green-clad teammate. "And why is that? Is it because the main branch will have a fit? Better yet, is it because you think you can beat me? However, I would advise that you don't try and fight me. I am the greatest taijutsu specialist in my age division, and as you can see, this match only proves that point," Neji said. Kimimaro answered rather smugly, "No, because I'm the only one stopping him from killing you," before turning his head to the side so Neji could get a glimpse of Naruto's glowing body. Even though Neji's Byakugan was not activated, he could feel the crushing pressure of his chakra and knew that the boy was exuding far more chakra than he had ever witnessed from any of the adults in his immediate vicinity. What on earth is he? Neji asked himself, and for the first time in his life, his constant self-assurance began to wane. Only Haku's serene ocean, like aura and the knowledge that he would have an opportunity to rip Neji a new one in front of hundreds of people, since the finals weren't held right away, were able to quell Naruto's barely contained rage. And even if that's the case, Naruto reflected, it will be nearly as satisfying to tear him a new one for all of our friends and foes to see. The white around his eyes started to bleed red as they tainted his irises, turning the blonde, cerulean blue orbs a deep maroon. He was unaware that he had tapped into the chakra of his darker half. Fortunately, a hesitant medic and Haku arrived behind him with a stretcher, preventing Neji from urinating. When he received a stern look from Haku, Naruto turned his bright purple eyes on the trembling man, lowered his chakra, and took a step back, but not before giving Neji one final glare that threatened to hurt. Ignoring all of the looks from his fellow genin, Naruto climbed back up the stairs in total silence, deciding to blow things out of proportion by focusing on Kimimaro. Naruto's question, "Strange, I understand how I got down there so fast, but your actions confuse me, Kimimaro. Hell, you even beat me down there," put Kimimaro on the spot. The Jonin and all the other Leaf Ninja were listening carefully, wondering how the stoic boy would escape this one. Without blinking, Kimimaro answered, "I was just playing the part of a Konoha shinobi." Kimimaro ended the discussion by utterly disregarding Naruto's presence and looking down at his sister, who was hurrying Hinata's unconscious body out of the arena. Naruto followed his gaze and realized that, although he didn't express it, Kimimaro had developed a concern for Konoha and its people, especially one injured Hyuga heiress. Kimimaro tried to shrug him off, but Naruto grabbed the boy's shoulder and held on, making him look at him and Neji, who was standing right behind them. Naruto declared, "Don't worry, he'll get what's coming to him, I'll make sure of it," sufficiently loud for Neji to hear. Naruto turned back to the albino warrior and looked directly into the teen's eyes, sending a smug grin over his shoulder. For a brief moment, Kimimaro maintained his expression of indifference, but he allowed a grin to appear when he realized that Naruto's spirit aligned perfectly with what he had just said. Kimimaro responded, "Don't let me down, blonde." Baka, subtly surprising Naruto with his sense of humor before lowering his gaze to the electronic bulletin board. Comparing Subaku no Gaara and Rock Lee, an enthusiastic taijutsu master jumped over the railing and into the arena, exclaiming, "Yosh! It's finally time for Konoha's Azure Beast to shine." His opponent, on the other hand, had remained silent throughout the matches and had only vanished in a cloud of sand before resurfacing in the ring, prepared for combat. Both fighters had the same idea in mind, despite their divergent styles. "I'll demonstrate my existence, Nindo." Hayate also declared the start of the match with that. With remarkable agility, Lee sidestepped each wave of sand that was hurled at him, darting forward like a green arrow. Lee threw a Konoha Senpu at Gaara, leaping over an attempt to seize his legs, but Gaara's automated defenses activated just as Lee was ready to make contact. "This shield will be a pain in the ass, but I must persevere," Lee roared as he continued the motion, aiming his other leg at Gaara's face, but was once again stopped. Lee kicked off the sand barrier before it completely covered his leg, and as he retreated, He unleashed a hail of shuriken, only to discover that Gaara's sand defenses had also stopped them. Sakura questioned why he didn't employ genjutsu or ninjutsu from above, but Lee ignored her and concentrated on reading his opponent's chakra in an attempt to identify a weakness in his defenses. Unfortunately, there wasn't, so Lee rushed forward determined to breach Gaara's defenses rather than waiting for Guy to finish telling the girl he was in love with about his disability. Lee continued to batter the sandy barrier relentlessly, avoiding the sand slaps that came from every direction without getting wet. However, the Suna shinobi became weary of the game and sent a massive wall of sand to capture Lee after one of his blows came closer to Gaara's face than the others. Lee landed on the hand seal statue that was shadowing the battlefield after doing several backflips and almost slipping into Gaara's clutches. Guy shouted from the stands, "Lee, you have my permission to take them off just this once," drawing odd looks from everyone in the vicinity. Luckily for the audience, Lee was wearing weights on both legs rather than stripping off his clothes. The crowd, Sakura in particular, showed him awe when the measly 50k weights caused large dents in the solid concrete below, and Lee smirked when the attractive Suna Kunoichi said that a few measly weights wouldn't make a difference. Lee's fist struck the sand as usual as he dashed toward Gaara, but this time his momentum permitted him to push through and nearly strike Gaara's shocked face. As he danced around Gaara, Lee thought to himself, "No, it's still not enough. If I want to finish this match, I need to land a clean blow." He was methodically moving closer and closer to Gaara's defense until, in a spectacular show of speed and skill, his foot crashed into Gaara's face, creating a deep cut across the boy's cheek. At that point, Gaara's desire to kill increased. As Lee watched anxiously as Gaara's body was covered in sand, he was aware that this kind of opponent would be able to defeat his Omid Renge and that, in order to win, he would need to use the Ura Renge, Reverse Lotus. When the man's face hardened with concern and reluctant acceptance of his student's choice, Lee simply smiled without giving his beloved sensei a meaningful look. Before starting to draw on the power of the hidden chakra gates, Lee muttered to himself, "Thank you, Guy Sensei." Opening, resting, living, suffering, and closing. As he unlocked gate after gate, Lee chanted to himself, transforming into his strongest form and startling everyone in the room, including the once bloodthirsty Gaara. Lee started dismantling Gaara's Suna no Yoroi, armor of sand. With ease, using his strength and minimal effort to destroy the concrete beneath his feet. When he reached his last legs of energy, his stamina reserve from avoiding the Omid Renge ran out, and his volley of fists started to draw blood. Lee did not even look at Neji as he moved in for the last blow, hammering away relentlessly at Gaara's prone airborne form. Lee rushed in even faster, taking pleasure in his rival's shocked and disbelieving expression, and as a result, he fell into Gaara's trap. Lee hadn't anticipated that Gaara would remember his sandy armor with the sand from his Suna no Tate, shield of sand. Concentrating all of it on the spot where Lee's fist made contact with Gaara's body, even though he was moving too quickly for Gaara's sand to hope to defend against him. The Subaku Soso's crushing pressure quickly followed, injuring the imprisoned limb, and the sand instantly wrapped around Lee's arm, wiping out all of the destructive power contained within. Lee let out a cry as his mind frantically tried to think of a way to escape this death grip. However, as all hope vanished and nothing came to mind, Lee felt a click inside of him, and the pressure on his arm briefly decreased. The pressure returned immediately after it was released, but this time it wasn't painful. For a brief moment, Lee felt chakra flow through his arm in a way he had previously believed was impossible for him. He was shocked to see that his arm was covered in an odd red and black pattern. The chakra push's strength was more than sufficient to penetrate Gaara's tiny sand coffin and deliver a forceful blow to her flimsy fortification. But as soon as Lee's fist made contact with Gaara, the power within him dwindled, and his once armored arm began to radiate an unimaginable pain that knocked him out cold. With unfathomable force, both shinobi struck the ground, causing a dust explosion. The two fighters, who were lying inches apart, were covered in blood. Lee, from his left arm, which was only red and ragged, and Gaara, from the barrage of blows Lee had thrown at him and the blood he had coughed up from Lee's final blow. Hayate simply shook his head from side to side while glancing down at the two unconscious Lees before ending the match. Because the contestant Rock Lee was rendered unconscious from his last technique and contestant Subaku no Gaara managed to remain conscious during the duration of the match, I declare the winner of this match Subaku no Gaara. Both Guy and Baki went to gather their injured students from the chaos below after hearing the decision. Considering that both Jonin were thinking incredulously, neither of them spoke. Guy discussed how, despite his years of taijutsu study, Lee might have unconsciously summoned a taijutsu ability he had never seen before, and Baki discussed how Gaara might have lost Both senseis put their students down and went back to their respective sides before focusing on the final match. Hinata Dosu vs Akamichi Choji. Dosu was eager to complete the preliminary rounds, and Choji was dragged into the arena by an enraged Ino who was fed up with him scolding her for her dieting plan that she had devised for the entire Team 10. But when Dosu called Choji a fat ass for having to diet, what had appeared to be a good match swiftly turned into a slaughter, and the rest is history. 8 of the 9 competitors who made it through were now standing next to each other as they were called up to draw lots to determine where they would go in the following round. They all went up one by one and received numbers 1 through 9. Following everyone's selection, Sasuke's ballot was drawn before the names of the winners were displayed above them on the electronic bulletin board. 1 Naruto Uzumaki, 2 Neji Hyuga, 3 Shikamaru Nara, 4 Tamari no Subaku, 5 Kankuro no Subaku, 6 Aburame Shino, 7 Subaku no Gara, 8 Sasuke Uchiha, 9 Choji Akamichi. Each contestant turned to face their opponent after the ballets were cast, and the majority of them were happy with the outcome. I immediately get that bastard. I'll demonstrate to the main house that the branch house is where real power is found. Why am I destined to fight women forever, Kami? I can finally have that sexist jerk. I'll demonstrate to him that a kunoichi is as deserving of respect as any shinobi. Before I have to battle this bug freak, I only hope the invasion begins. It's interesting that my opponent appears to be experiencing anxiety. I'll have to factor that into my calculations. The blood of the Uchiha will attest to my existence. I'm lucky to have received the bye round, but before anyone could express these ideas, the Hokage cleared his throat and made his farewell remarks. The Hokage then left the finalists to their own devices, saying, I advise each and every one of you to take this month and remake yourself as shinobi. Therefore, when the time comes for you to show the people from each of the element countries your strength, you can prove to them that you are ready to become a chunin. Naruto quickly located the exit and headed to the hospital, determined to see Hinata before beginning his training. At the Konohagakure Medical Center, the only indication that Naruto's first and best friend was still alive was the intermittent beeping of Hinata's EKG machine. Naruto had seen firsthand the devastation that even a standard Juken blow, let alone Neji's most recent technique, could do to the body, despite his repeated assurances that she would be okay. Naruto tightened his hold on the pale-eyed girl's hand as she tightened hers around his. Naruto was in the middle of cursing for the little girl. Naruto was taken aback by the scene and watched in shock as Hinata opened her eyes after only a few hours of sleep. How are you awake? Neji's blow should have been enough to kill you. Why you should be, Naruto began, but was interrupted by a familiar hand on his shoulder. A very professional-sounding Haku, who had practiced her explanation once more, said from behind him, Hinata-chan will be fine, and despite the fact that normally such an injury would indeed be fatal, my knowledge of acupuncture and study of the inner workers of Juken made it a simple matter to reopen Hinata Tenketsu with a few needles and undo the internal damage through normal means. Even though it was her 5th time explaining her methods, once to the girl's father, Kurenai and Shino, and the on-call medic who was about to declare the case hopeless, Haku wasn't even remotely irritated when she finally explained them to Naruto. After she clarified that his friend would be okay, she actually liked the amazed and appreciative expression Naruto was giving her. Ignoring Haku's blush, Naruto leapt to his feet and embraced him tightly, letting the girl know how much he valued her actions. Regretfully, he failed to remember that there was a person in the room who was like a close sister to him and would even go so far as to taunt him while he indulged one of his hidden cravings. Hum! Exclaimed Hinata after her loud throat clearing failed to attract the two's attention. Despite how touching this scene is Naruto, I need some sleep, and you glomping Haku over there isn't the last thing I want to see before I fall asleep, so if you would, Hinata said as she pointed to the door. After dropping the frozen princess from his grasp, Naruto simply turned and left the room, taking a giggling Haku with him. When the two saw Kimimaro leaning on the wall directly next to the doorway, they immediately jumped apart after crossing the threshold. When Naruto asked Haku if she understood why he was here, he forced himself not to blush severely. Haku pathetically said, because he sort of escorted me here, regretting that she had forgotten her brother's presence and even more so that he had seen her and Naruto holding hands. Before the bone-wielding warrior strode straight up to him and passed him without a word, Naruto could only mouth the word, "Oh." Naruto was relieved that the teenager didn't speak to him or, worse, try to start a fight in the middle of a hospital hallway. However, he couldn't help but wonder what could be so important to Kimimaro that he would disregard his sister and himself showing their affection in public. From the room behind him, Hinata's shocked voice called, "Kimi-kun?" The heiress's voice was so full of joy and surprise that she didn't have any thoughts of sleeping. No, they aren't doing that, so get your mind out of the gutter. Naruto cried out, "Ha, Kimi-kun. Oh how the mighty have fallen." Loudly. Naruto laughed at the imposing Kimimoro's moniker despite Haku's reprimands and the icy stares of both Hinata and Kimimaro. As Hinata hurried to repair the damage, she said, "I'm so sorry Kimimaro-kun. It just slipped," but it only made Naruto laugh more. Haku had to pull the hysterical blonde away before they were expelled from the hospital for making too much noise because Kimimoro's eyes became icy. As they got closer to the nurse's changing room, Naruto finally stopped laughing after a series of irritated glances and a threat to freeze his vocal cords. When he saw the door labeling, Naruto raised an eyebrow. When Haku punched him for his perverted thinking, Naruto simply laughed. Naruto's suggestive reply, "What? I didn't say anything, and besides you had to have been thinking the same thing to justify hitting me," caused the teenage girl next to him to flush brightly. Even though her words sounded more like commands, Haku said, "Well Naruto-kun, if you don't mind, I need to change, so how about you go visit your teammate Sasuke, while I change and I'll meet back up with you at the front desk." Taking the hint, Naruto went to visit his teammate, whom, contrary to popular opinion, he didn't despise because that suggests a desire for murder. No, he simply detested Sasuke excessively because he was aware that any departure from Haku's plan could lead to a Senbon shower. Naruto discovered a startling dearth of fangirls when he ascended to his least favorite teammate's room and quickly came to the conclusion that Kakashi might be a more adept investigator than he had previously thought. Before he ran into the man in question, Naruto remarked jokingly, "Wow, you might just be worthy of all the legends made for you Kakashi. Sensei, to fool Sasuke's hordes of followers without having to resort to deadly force." Kakashi said, "Oh hello Naruto, didn't expect to see you here," without ever raising his head from his book. "Hey, why is it such a surprise for me to visit one of my teammates when they are in the hospital?" joked Naruto. The only reaction Naruto received was Kakashi looking up from his book. Naruto began, "Well I'll make this quick then, seeing as Haku's probably already at the front desk waiting for me," but Kakashi raised an eyebrow and laughed. Given that Kakashi might be mocking Haku, Naruto asked, "What's so funny?" Kakashi responded, "Oh nothing, it was just a similarity I picked up between you and this book. The lead character, in this case you, manages to befriend his enemy and in a short time they're best of friends, and Naruto had his undivided attention for the first time since the conversation began. Well eventually after about 6 months' time the two become more than friends, and, Kakashi began, but Naruto gave him a rather menacing glare, so he was never able to finish. Declaring angrily, "You better stop while you're ahead Kakashi," Naruto dropped the honorary, "Sensei," entirely. Kakashi added, "Well, let's just say I find it humorous that you and this book have so many parallels and I'm looking forward to seeing just how many you follow," avoiding Naruto's irate jab at his book. During the entire ordeal, Kakashi didn't take his eyes off his book. "Tisk tisk Naruto, and this is one of the reasons that I decided I couldn't train you in this upcoming month. You have no sense of humor," he continued. "And Sasuke does," Naruto shot back cynically, drawing a startled glance from Kakashi. "Come on Sensei. Don't take me for a fool. I've known ever since the names were announced that you would be training Sasuke, and for once, I'm alright with it because like you said in the wave, I am a self-reliant student and that's not something I would give away. Even for a chance to train exclusively with the great Sharingan Kakashi. Besides, there's not much else you can teach me without directly spoon-feeding it to me and like we have both stated before, that's something neither of us want to do," replied Naruto. A little surprised at how well Naruto was handling it, Kakashi simply nodded in agreement. Because he had betrayed him, he was half expecting him to storm off in some rage. Before departing Kakashi with a puzzled grin, Naruto continued, "Kakashi, one thing though, make sure Sasuke is strong when you come back in a month, because if I beat him too easily in front of an audience from all over the shinobi globe, he may just kill himself." As the boy turned the corner toward the stairs, Kakashi called out to Naruto, "I'll tell him you said that Naruto and don't think I forgot about you. I called in some favors and I managed to get someone willing to teach you a few things while I'm gone," before the boy went back to his favorite book. Where was I now? The lobby at Konohagakure Hospital is still there. Naruto was 5 minutes late, which worried Haku, and her paranoia was beginning to overwhelm her. What if he stumbled into the anesthesia closet after getting lost? He might be falling asleep and never waking up, or worse, he might have picked himself up an infected syringe and gotten AIDS, SARS, or Ebola. What if? Haku was about to come up with yet another terrible plan for Naruto when she felt a tap on her shoulder. The man, unaware that he had just triggered yet another insane possibility in Haku's mind, said, "Excuse me, miss. You wouldn't have seen a short blonde around here? Goes by the name Naruto and can be incredibly annoying once you get to know him." But the boy in question showed up just in time to stop Haku from hurling any of her molten, insane thoughts at the defenseless man. With a shout that brought everyone's focus entirely to the scene before him, Naruto said, "Sorry I'm late, Haku-chan. I hope I didn't keep you too, Ebisu. Sensei, what are you doing to Haku-chan?" From the perspective of an onlooker, the scene appeared clearly incorrect, even though Ebisu was only placing his hand on Haku's shoulder. In an attempt to persuade the throng surrounding him of his innocence, Ebisu frantically uttered, "Wait, Naruto, it's not what it looks like." But after drawing Haku closer to him and creating a bigger commotion, Naruto persuaded everyone that he was a pervert. Naruto yelled, "Ebisu, no arrow. Sensei, don't touch Haku-chan. I can't believe you would even try hitting on someone so young." Which made everyone turn to hateful, disgusted looks at poor Ebisu. Ebisu tried to say, "Wait, it isn't what it looks like," but no one was paying attention. Feeling embarrassed, he simply sighed and looked Naruto in the eye. The crowd poofed out of existence after hearing the words, "You win, Naruto," revealing themselves to be a large number of shadow clones. Only a startled nurse and a laughing fool remained by her side. Ebisu said, "You actually had me convinced that time," and then he stood up. 2 important lessons were lost in the midst of the excitement. First, always check underneath, and second, never place a wager with Uzumaki Naruto, regardless of age. As they left the hospital and headed into town, Naruto retorted, "Well, I hadn't pulled a prank in years, at least not since the old man started taking care of me, so I had to make this one big especially for our bet." "Wait, what bet?" Haku said, perplexed as to why Naruto was grinning so strangely. "Years ago, right after the third started taking direct care of Naruto, I was assigned as the boy's instructor while the Sandaime was away. Well, in order to stop him from pulling his constant pranks, I bet him that if he could prank me then I would teach him anything he wanted to know," Ebisu told the perplexed youngster. Naruto continued, grinning, "Hey, don't forget the second part, Ebisu. Sensei, or should I now say Arrow? Sensei," his smile only growing as he noticed the spectacled man's uneasiness. Haku edged away from Ebisu and directly into Naruto's open arms, asking, "What second part?" Ebisu, who shuddered at the idea of his new moniker, explained, "Naruto caught me reading the hit series, Icha Icha Paradise, before he knew what it was about, so after I explained it to him, he insisted on calling me by that name. Therefore, as a prize for pranking him, I get to call him that whenever I want," Naruto exclaimed with delight as they arrived at their destination. Ebisu said, "So it's the usual place then," before drawing his shades up to conceal the twisted gleam in his eyes. Naruto threatened, "Yeah, it's the hot springs again, so no funny ideas, Arrow. Sensei," before he and his 2 friends entered the co-ed spring. Later on, Ebisu yelled, again, to Naruto, who was honing his chakra control by condensing his chakra shaku into a single sphere. It seemed to be training for a powerful jutsu that Ebisu had promised to teach him years before. Naruto shot back, becoming increasingly irritated ever since Haku crossed over to swim in the springs. "I'm trying, but it's harder than it looks, Arrow. Sensei," he said. When Naruto noticed a trembling mass of wooden boards, he released the chakra molding and threw his eyes over towards the ladies-only spring. Ebisu was flying through the air when he first realized what it was and, trying to be chivalrous, attacked the mass. With his own Sannin dance, the white-haired Sannin bragged, "That'll teach you to mess with the great toad sage Jiraiya." An orb of chakra, however, sped past him and into the air before he could finish, frightening every woman in the spring Jiraiya was looking in. Jiraiya turned to face the offending figure, but he was unable to speak once his gaze settled on the blonde boy who was staring at him with a bring-it-on expression in his eyes and an orb of chakra floating in his hand. "Minato?" Haku's voice broke the quiet tension before Jiraiya could finish thinking, "It can't be, he's dead, The wet girl shouted, "Naruto-kun, what happened?" bringing the boy's gaze sideways and allowing Jiraiya to fully see the faded whisker marks on the side of his face. My grandson is still living?" As a mob of nude women rushed into the streets behind him, determined to consign him to the lower reaches of hell, that was all Jiraiya could think. "There he is, girls. Let's get this pervert," yelled the irate mob leader. Since the majority of the females were Chunin or higher level shinobi and were out for blood, Jiraiya had no intention of stopping and starting or even remaining in the general area, even though they were a group of steamy, wet females. Instead of disappearing during the mob's initial shocked reaction, the pervert nin had to dodge the hail of income kunai, shuriken, and low to mid-powered jutsu because the sight of his grandson had slowed his normally refined reactions to a trickle. When a bolt of pure chakra struck him from behind and struck a tenketsu that caused pain on his back, he was forced to pay the price. The Sannin immediately looked around for the culprit, only to focus on yet another agonizing memory for him. Below him was Hinata, clad in a wet towel, her face displaying a look of unadulterated, righteous rage. The Hyuga's 4-point pentacle heirloom dangled in one hand, and she had the obvious intention of killing the intruder in her eyes. Gazing down at the Hyuga heiress with a stunned expression on his face, Jiraiya thought painfully, "Kami, not her too. I was told she was kidnapped and killed." She was carrying one of the two head family heirlooms that established her status as the heir apparent, so there was no other explanation. If that wasn't enough, she embodied, as he recalled, both his mother's inner fire and passion and his father's poise and dignity. Given the stark contrast in appearance, it was difficult to accept that she was his granddaughter. "That's what happens when you allow your daughter to marry into the Hyuga," Jiraiya added wryly, remembering his daughter's insistence on marrying Heishi at such a young age. Jiraiya could halt the memories by turning his head away from the agonizing scene. He was reminded by Hinata that his daughter had paid the ultimate price and passed away just a few years after giving birth to her first child, who had reportedly been killed in a failed kidnapping attempt years earlier. Jiraiya came to the realization that he had been deceived for over 10 years and that the only person who could provide him with the answers he required was, regrettably, the same person who had been deceiving him for over 13 years. Jiraiya suppressed his anger by pushing it deep inside of him before displaying a chilly exterior. He would reserve his rage for a worthy victim and concentrate all of his energy on getting away from the enraged crowd around him alive in the interim. Before turning on the shunshin he had been shaping and teleporting away, Jiraiya offered jokingly, "Well, ladies, I'm sorry, but I have pressing matters to attend to, so can we reschedule this to some other time? Preferably in a relaxed environment." When two massive bolts of chakra struck the area where the Sannin had been, his departure turned out to be timely. Jiraiya's departure and the chakra trail that led to his destination were obscured by a flash that blinded everyone nearby. And with that, the set was finished. Sarutobi was relieved to have finally caught up on all the paperwork he had been behind on. The fact was that he was rarely in the office because of the Chunin exams and the fact that admitting 3 new shinobi had taken up a significant amount of his time. As the menacing cloud that had once been his pupil hovered over his head like a sharpened guillotine, the seasoned shinobi thought sardonically, "And don't get me started on Orochimaru." For the first time in years, Sarutobi let out a weary sigh, revealing his actual age. The fearless leader of Leaf for more than 30 years appeared to be little more than an old man who had seen too much to be concerned about the issues facing the younger generation. Sadly, there is no respite for the tired, and he has just been confronted by yet another issue. "We need to talk." Sarutobi knew he was in for a treat when he looked up into his old student's eyes. Jiraiya, the gregarious pervert of Sarutobi's genin team and later legendary Sannin, gazed at his former sensei with a remarkable amount of contempt tinged with murderous intent and little more than barely disguised rage. Sarutobi knew that if he had been anyone else, Jiraiya would have either pushed the fourth's valuable jutsu so far into his stomach that he would be tasting chakra for weeks or ripped his throat out with his bare hands. Sarutobi's candid response, "I suppose you met Naruto-kun then," got right to the crux of the matter. The elder man felt he owed it to his student to refrain from lying because he had done so for far too long and there wasn't much else he could do given their positions. Jiraiya roared, his rage finally boiling over. "Yes, I did, but then again it isn't every day you meet your grandchild in a hot spring carrying the only memento of his father," he said. In a morbid manner, Sarutobi reflected that he had at last discovered something other than alcohol, women, and money that could make the eternal pervert laugh. Sadly, this was no laughing matter. "I suppose you do have a point," Jiraiya loudly interrupted Sarutobi before he could say anything more. "A point? Of course I have a motherfucking point, you shriveled up old ape. For the last 12 years of my life I have been lied to, and by none other than my own sensei at that," Jiraiya said. "Need I remind you, you are still in the presence of your superior, in every sense of the word I may add, and I will not tolerate your blatant disrespect," the Hokage interrupted, replacing his worn-out, elderly face with the fearless leader's facade of the hidden leaf. Jiraiya huffed angrily as he allowed his temper to simmer. "PFT as if old man, I doubt you could get out of your chair without blowing a joint," he said. Jiraiya was aware that the older man's statements were more than half true, despite his refusal to acknowledge it. Every time they actually sparred, Sarutobi had won, but mostly because Jiraiya was never able to use all of his strength, such as when he was defending his beloved people or fighting an enemy nin. But that didn't mean he wasn't still angry with the old ape, he would just be more restrained in how he expressed it. Sarutobi, however, grinned in spite of the rude remark because he could feel his pupil's kill intent and general control of his rage had significantly decreased. Given that he would have been speaking with his hands rather than his mouth if their roles had been reversed, Sarutobi could even go so far as to claim that Jiraiya was a better man than he was. Before he could go any deeper into his old Genin's team's obvious dysfunctions, Sarutobi was startled out of his reverie by his still rather Pei-Jo. Ed student. At least I still carry sway over one of my students, the elderly man thought sadly as his thoughts drifted to these two estranged students. Silently, Jiraiya remarked, "That still doesn't explain why you lied to me." Even though his voice had lost all of its fiery passion, the elder ninja found that these words were far more powerful than the irate cries that were in front of them. Sarutobi could handle passionate speeches and blazing rage in his role as Hokage, but he was unable to handle obvious displays of suffering and desperation in his role as a teacher and, more importantly, as a second father to his students. Because Jiraiya, your standing with the village during the time of Naruto's birth was less than admirable, and although your spy network needed to be managed and upheld, given you that sort of information would have been a risk to the village, Sarutobi replied after a long pause. With his annoyance growing once more, Jiraiya retorted, "But my grandson, Saru. Sensei, you know I would never do anything to endanger my grandchild, either of them." The Hokage's face briefly flashed with shock before wrinkles from aging once more tainted it. After he dropped another bomb on his sensei, Jiraiya spat sarcastically, "Are you surprised? I hadn't intended to tell you that I found out about her until after I brought Tsunade into this little secret, but I figure hey, their grandmother would probably want a private crack at you as well. Jiraiya, I understand that you are mad, but no, Saru. Sensei, you haven't seen mad. This right here is nothing compared to the shit storm you were about to weather when Tsunade finds out that not one but two of her grandchildren had been hidden away from her. I just pray for your soul she is feeling generous and will let you die after that encounter, because I doubt you'd want her to heal you, just to have to go through it all over again once you're finished." Jiraiya grumbled as deeper expressions of anxiety appeared on Sarutobi's brow. Sarutobi said, yes, I knew that day would come and I had long planned to be dead when you two found out, but since that won't be happening I figure I should tell you this now," before exhaling deeply. "Officially, my reasons for withholding information on the articles of Namikaze Naruto and Hyuga Hinata's deaths are that both you and Tsunade, both blood relatives to the two, were unfit to be trusted with such sensitive information." Sarutobi began only to be met by a furious Jiraiya replied. "However, in reality that was only a story to please the council. In truth you two were held ignorant to the fact, because if you both had known Naruto, and later Hinata would have been taken out of the village had you had known of their treatment," Sarutobi said. With suspicious eyes narrowing at unexpected situations, Jiraiya asked, "What do you mean their treatment?" Sarutobi finished enduring Jiraiya's impending reaction without even flinching. Naruto is hailed a bit of a pariah and scapegoat for the village's pain towards Kyuubi, whereas Hinata's mixed blood has earned her much contempt from the Hyuga Council, and from what I've heard from Heishi his hands are tied if and when the clan elders elect to place her in the branch family, he said. The remnants of what had once been a beautiful vase were strewn across the floor, and there was a crash. Had it not belonged to the previous Tsuchikage, the murderous bastard that he had been, Sarutobi would have been furious. His precious Earth Country urn never stood a chance. "Where are they? I'll kill them all for hurting my children like that," Jiraiya vowed, prepared to reintroduce his son's favorite jutsu and his prized pupil to the Hyuga elder and the majority of the village's residents. "Calm down, Jiraiya, or you won't be of any assistance to either of them," Sarutobi jokingly said, glaring at the enraged man. Sarutobi briefly braced himself for Jiraiya's assault, but as he was about to leap, the Sannin's muscles relaxed, and he slumped into a chair, feeling as worn out and elderly as his sensei. With a weary grin, Jiraiya questioned, "They are my blood, how can you not expect me to get this worked up?" remembering the moment his sensei nearly tore Stone Jonin's head off for injuring his son Asuma. The fact that Asuma had used a kawarimi and that the horrifying image of a kunai in his clavicle was actually a well-placed hinge was the only thing, if memory served, that kept the man from being completely decapitated. Sarutobi replied, "I don't, but I expect you to at least try to keep your head no matter how hard it may be, and that includes not telling the two of you and Tsunade's relationship to them until the time is right," anticipating how this would be received. "Oh no, you may be a liar, but I have no intention of being one." They deserve to know as soon as possible. Too much time has been lost as it is. Jiraiya quickly shot back, finding it disgusting that anyone would lie, even by omission. Understand, Jiraiya, the time isn't too far off. Well, at least not until we can convince Tsunade to come back, and as you said, these two are the perfect reason. However, until then, these two do not need to be burdened with the truth of their origins, especially with Chunin exams so close, Sarutobi said. Damn that ape's logic, Jiraiya thought, recalling old memories from deep inside of him. They sat in silence for a long time before Jiraiya found the strength to speak. The Sannin whispered to his sensei, I just wanted to be in their lives, and I wasn't going to tell them everything, just that I was there and Tsunade would be too. In retrospect, Sarutobi discovered that it was foolish to undervalue a parent's love, and that the two's loss and rediscovery meant much more to the Toad Sannin than he had initially thought. He had sacrificed his life for his son, and he was certain Jiraiya wouldn't follow suit. As he watched the white-haired Sannin struggle with his memories, the ape summoner silently sent his condolences to his student. I'm not saying that you have to stay completely away from them, but just hold off from telling them until Tsunade is here. These children are young, and move over there, Shinobi. They will be suspicious of your relationship to them and will ask questions, ones I'm not sure you are ready to answer, he said. Sarutobi, who was also overcome with sadness, said, if it's any consolation, I am sorry for the pain Orochimaru caused you or Tsunade. Had I not been so blind, I would have seen his treachery sooner as well as the many wrongs he had committed, especially those to you too. We were just as blind as you, and Orochimaru just took advantage of that as well as our trust. Plus there is no way you could have known what Orochimaru was doing to us. Hell, we didn't even know until after he left and read our files, and by then Minato and Umi were already family. Getting those documents just proved that me and Tsunade's blood was running through their veins. Jiraiya responded, sympathizing with his instructor's feelings. Sarutobi openly acknowledged his biggest flaw by saying, true, but Orochimaru should never have been allowed to experiment on people, let alone his own teammates, and him making clones with both your and Tsunade's DNA only proves my failure as a teacher. Orochimaru created Namikaze Umi and Minato, twins, in a laboratory as part of his quest to discover a means of becoming immortal. The insane Sannin reasoned that a body like that would be valuable if the blood of a person blessed by the Toad clan itself mixed with the royal blood of the first Hokage. His experiments were, regrettably, too time-consuming for him, and he didn't want to wait more than 15 years for his body to mature like fruit when he could wait only 3 and simply swap minds with another human. While Orochimaru pursued other interests, Minato and Umi were left in an orphanage with nothing but each other and a six-sided cross to their names. Before he heard Sarutobi sigh in despair, Jiraiya rambled joyfully, no, that only proves how demented my former comrade was, and still is, but I guess it's for the best now that he's gone. Besides, I got a son and daughter I never had, with the woman of my dreams no less. Sarutobi remarked, your words aren't entirely correct, Jiraiya. Orochimaru is back and he's ready to go to war, before Jiraiya's face started to flush. With a sarcastic smile, Jiraiya exclaimed, so that's when you called me, and to think I was going to ignore it. Glad I didn't, because now I get to kick old Orochi-chan's ass. The Toad Sannin exuded confidence on the outside, but the little boy, who still harbored feelings of inferiority toward the pale snake Sannin, was trembling inside at the prospect of failing once more. No, Jiraiya, this is my fight. Your main reason for being here is to protect the village. With a slight smirk on his face, Jiraiya skillfully implied, you mean protect my grandchildren? Don't think I'm still the naive boy from so many decades ago. I've learned a lot, especially when it comes to relationships, and my gut tells me you called me back here knowing I would find them and would stay solely to make sure they're safe. With the same kind of smirk on his face, Sarutobi shot back, maybe, and if you are right, just consider that an old man's way of apologizing. Jiraiya laughed at the idea of watching that battle and said, well, I accept your apology, but after this war with Orochi, realize that you have an impossible battle with the greatest force on this planet. Just because you can't do anything against Tsunade doesn't mean I can't, the Hokage shot back, laughing at all the memories of Jiraiya being torn apart by Tsunade. Jiraiya called before his sensei started working on his observing orb and scrying his 2 recently rediscovered grandchildren. Yeah, you old ape. Just get to using that crystal ball jutsu, because like I said before, I have precious time to be catching up on, Jiraiya said. 15 minutes ago, at the hot spring. After the bathing kunoichi thoroughly inspected the surrounding area, the offending pervert was nowhere to be found when the blinding light faded, and the women eagerly went back to their baths to complete their soak. The thoroughly embarrassed genin were in a unique situation that was not noticed by any of the angry females amid all the chaos. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, Naruto sobbed frantically, shielding his eyes from Hinata, who was wrapped in a towel and desperately clinging to it while attempting to juke Naruto with her free hand. Her free hand wasn't really free, though, because it was actually chained to Naruto's hand in an extremely tight one. During Jiraiya's flight, their two pentacles somehow fused, putting them in an awkward situation. Stop apologizing and just leave, shouted Hinata, exasperated. A wandering pervert had quickly soured her leisurely spa treatment after a particularly trying day, and now that she was essentially handcuffed to her surrogate brother, it was going to hell. Haku, her friend and sister to the man she was secretly attracted to, was watching the entire event with a little less than barely concealed embarrassment, so her embarrassment didn't stop there. The two trapped teenagers thought, Cammy, why me? As they gave in to the urge to pull each other in different directions and joined forces in an effort to break free from their mutual shackles. With all the force he was using, Naruto nearly pulled his shoulder out of its socket, proving that it had failed. When Haku saw this, she had an idea and used the senbon expertly to pinch multiple pressure points in the blonde's arm, killing it. Hinata was able to free her hand from the chain as soon as the appendage went limp, and she promptly rubbed the sore spot. Naruto cried out, "Gee, thanks Haku, but how am I ever going to train with a limp? Dear Cammy in heaven, that hurts." As an unexpected burst of chakra entered his numb arm. Naruto turned to face his criminal and saw Hinata grinning at him in a manner reminiscent of the evil lady of Makai herself, before glaring at her. Hinata shot back coyly, knowing full well that her words would only irritate Naruto. "Oh come on, you were just complaining about not being able to move your arm, and now that I've restored your movement all you can do is whine about a bit to pain," she said. As a painful recollection of his early training sessions with his friends returned to him, Naruto countered, "A little pain? You shot me up with more juken than that one time I suggested we all diet." Naruto winced at the thought of all the bruises Shikamaru had, thinking, I swear the only one to get a worse beating than that was Shika, and that's mainly because he can't keep his mouth shut. In addition, the Hyuga added, would ever stop being a baby, and beside we should be worrying about more important things, like getting you ready for the exam, figuring out what the hell just happened, getting back to my bath, while maintaining a dreamy expression. Naruto ignored the remainder of the girl's statement as he continued to stare at the changed piece of metal, returning his focus to the merged pentacle on his friend's wrist. With a spooky silverfish light, the chakra focusers that had previously been 4 and 5 sides had combined to create a 6-pointed cross. For some reason, Naruto felt strangely familiar with the tranquility of gleaming jewelry, and he couldn't get rid of the feeling that he was somehow linked to that metal. Hinata saw the blonde's eyes and knew her soak would have to wait. After giving her friend a thoughtful glance, she went to change. Feeling like the third wheel in all of this, Haku remained silent in the hopes that the two would leave soon and spare her the humiliation. Unfortunately for her, after seeing some of the boys' less admirable characteristics and behaviors, the Sandame, and later Hinata, Sakura, and Ino, had hammered manners into the boy's skull. "Sorry about that. Sometimes I get so lost in my own thoughts that I forget what's around me. Don't worry though, I don't plan to leave you out on this one. 'Cause I'm sure you're dying to find out more about that thing like I am," Naruto said to his partner with dark hair. Haku politely responded, "Oh, I don't mind, it really wasn't any of my business and I don't want to intrude on something as private as that between you and Hinata-san," and was sincerely touched that Naruto had wanted to involve her in something that was clearly important to him. Naruto reaffirmed sternly, his eyes displaying only total honesty and sincerity. "Nonsense, you're welcome to come. You are a Konoha citizen now, you have nothing to fear within these walls, but more importantly you are my friend and I don't want you to ever feel like you can't approach me with anything," he said. For the first time, the constant composure Haku had kept over herself vanished into a giggling mass of frantic blushing and despairing romantic thoughts as the warm sensation that had filled her chest abruptly spread throughout her entire body. Haku eventually managed to stammer out, "Thank you Naruto, I'm not sure what to say," as he faced Naruto's intense gaze. Naruto remarked, "Think nothing of it, and just show your thanks by coming with us too," before disappearing to their destination. Even though the Hokage had given him his share of the next bracelet, Naruto was fairly certain that the elderly man was too busy to be concerned about such matters, particularly now that the Chunin exam was in progress. However, aside from him, Naruto knew no one else who could potentially be able to provide him with an answer. As she left the dressing room, Hinata interrupted, "We need to go to the Hyuga complex." Naruto asked, echoing Haku's and his own question, "Why there?" After Hinata responded, "Because the Hokage's busy and did you forget I got my half of this thing from my father, so he's bound to know something about it," she left for her ancestral home. As they strolled through the village at their leisurely pace, The three engaged in cheerful conversation. Hinata was aware that she was the reason they were moving so slowly, but the fact that neither of her friends seemed to mind made her smile. A grin that appeared as soon as they stepped through the Hyuga gates. When Naruto saw the one person in the world he wanted to harm the most, his eyes narrowed as he followed the girl's gaze. To someone who has witnessed how it should be performed, Neji was frighteningly close to perfecting his form while immersed in his Hake Kata. Neji stood erect and ended his Kata in the traditional Hake-ready stance before looking at the newcomers. When he noticed Hinata's uninterested eyes and Naruto's scowl, a sarcastic grin appeared on his face. He was aware that he was provoking the blonde, and the young Hyuga hoped the boy would lose it so he could give him a sneak peek at what would happen in a month. Hinata whispered, "Naruto, it's not worth it," as she caught the blonde shinobi by the bicep to prevent him from acting hastily. Though he knew deep down that Hinata was doing it for him, Naruto raged inside that she was shielding the bastard. Even though he wanted to purify Neji's soul, he knew that if he fought him now, he would lose. At least not without using his Shinigami powers, and it would undoubtedly be despised to kill a competitor before the test. How unyouthful, Neji, to stand idle whilst in the middle of your training. Why, if Guy Sensei were here, you would have to do 1000 push-ups, 100 laps around the complex. Lee yelled behind his cocky teammate before moving on to more seemingly insurmountable tasks that startled the boy out of his break and made the teenager reluctantly return to work. Lee gave Naruto a sidelong glance and a tiny smile to indicate that he understood. Before entering the old-fashioned mansion, Naruto thought slyly, "I'll have to make sure to thank Lee later. Maybe I'll refrain from maiming his teammate so that way he doesn't have to take time out of training to find another one." Naruto had learned to appreciate many of the small things, such as air conditioning and running water, despite having spent a significant portion of his life in poverty. However, he would always feel jealous whenever he visited the opulent Hyuga complex, and this time was no different. Naruto couldn't help but feel jealous as Haku took in everything with complete awe, from the expansive Zen garden in the middle of the complex to the hardwood floors that ran the length of the place. Naruto tried his hardest to repress the feeling, which he perceived as strange and uncomfortable. The three followed Hinata closely as she led them through the maze-like layout of the main branch's house until they arrived at the largest building in the estate. Hinata paused at a pair of stately oaken double doors that were watched over by two members of the branch house. She moved forward, attracting their attention. With courtesy, Hinata said, "I request an audience with my father, Heishi Sama." Her friends were surprised that she had to be so formal when speaking to her own father, but Hinata knew that if there was a crucial meeting taking place in the office, her bursting in would only reflect poorly on the Hyuga. "Hi Hinata Sama, I will see if Heishi Sama," bowed one of the branch members. With a nod of her own, Hinata added sweetly, "Thank you," giving the man more thanks than any of her main branch brethren, out of fear that anything more would make him drop to his knees. The guard briefly vanished before making his way back to his post, leaving the door open behind him. The three took it as an invitation to enter, but the two guards quickly blocked their path. The person on the left said, "Only Hinata Sama and Uzumaki-san may enter." This is the word of the Hyuga head, without ever glancing down at the three. Naruto was furious that he had been accused of lying, but he felt all of his control return when a cool hand touched his shoulder. Haku calmed Naruto's annoyance with a few soothing words and a straightforward gesture. "It's okay, Naruto-kun. I'll see you back at the spa when you're done," he said. The guards gazed at Haku in wonder that one kunoichi had accomplished what Anbu squads had failed to do. Before one of the guards led Haku out of the complex and the other remained there, closing the door behind the two who had entered the office, the two guards pondered whether the mischievous and vindictive spirit of Uzumaki Naruto could be subdued by someone so young. The Heishi office was a delicate fusion of contemporary business and ancient culture. Like traditional furniture, all of the tables were low to the floor and encircled by the finest silken cushions. However, the room was illuminated with a soft, mellowing light from seal-powered lamps on the walls. Hiashi's mediating form sat behind his desk, with multiple shadows cast by the room's lights behind him, giving the impression that the man was larger and more intimate than usual. Naruto thought sarcastically, as if he needed that, but Hinata's abrupt bow took him by surprise. Reluctantly, Naruto followed suit and waited silently for Heishi to recognize them. They didn't have to wait long because Hiashi's eyes opened and looked at the two shinobi in front of him before Naruto could even become agitated. Heishi gestured toward the cushions in front of him and said, "Rise and come forward, we have much to discuss." Even though there was no threat or anger in his voice, they still obeyed because it had an authoritative tone. Once they were seated, the two observed Heishi create a single seal with one hand before the wooden wall behind him collapsed and retreated, exposing the Hyuga Zen garden. Astonished by the performance, Naruto's admiration for Heishi increased by roughly 3 levels due to the coolness of his actions alone, returning to roughly where it was before he expelled Haku. Naruto thought about that, but Hinata beat him to the punch before he could say anything. With a curious, almost accusing glint in her eyes, Hinata gazed at her father, hoping to read his face for an answer. "Father, something strange happened while I was at the hot springs today. The trinket you gave me, the one that belonged to Mother, reacted strangely to the pentacle." Naruto.kun claims that Sarutobi said it was from his father, Hinata said. When Heishi received no response, he simply beckoned for Hinata's hand. She then removed the amulet from her wrist and hovered over Hiashi's open palm. As Hiashi's chakra concluded its interaction with the six-armed cross, it broke into 2 pieces once more with another flash. "This you two is the object that links you two together. This is the inheritance your parents, twin brother and sister, have left you," he said solemnly. As he pulled his eyes away from the 5-armed star and looked into Blonde's eyes, Heishi explained, "The 5-armed pentacle represents all the natures of chakra, and after much study its first owner, the 4th Hokage and Naruto's father, found that the pentacle refines the wielder's control of elemental nature of chakra several times faster than practice without it." A moment of recognition flashed through Naruto's mind, and he understood that it was the reason he had been able to improve his wind control so quickly and efficiently during the wave mission. Whereas this 4-armed cross represents the 4 natures in which chakra can be used. Nin, Tai, Gen, and Fuinjutsu are all encompassed in the power of this amulet, thus bestowing the user to create and maintain jutsu faster and longer, Heishi said as he looked at his oldest daughter. The development of her Hake, Jinsoku Shuin Sho, then seemed strange to her. Normally, it would take years to develop a technique like that, but each time she encountered a particularly challenging obstacle in her technique, she discovered that after a few attempts, her chakra appeared to be able to get past it. Because the amulet was strengthening her chakra, she never suspected why. Given how much she and Naruto had unintentionally depended on the power of their respective objects, Hinata worriedly asked, "So does that mean without those trinkets any progress we've made with them becomes invalid?" Heishi replied, proud to see that neither of the teenagers in front of him appeared overly concerned. "No, these devices enhance the user's ability to create and master their chakra. So any progress you've made with them will still be yours, but if you have jutsu that require these objects as medium, then without them they're useless to you," he said. Heishi watched as the 2 amulets merged back into one before another flash filled the room, allowing his chakra to ebb out of them. As the 6-pointed star hovered over his hand once more, Heishi explained, "This however is known by few as the 6 paths of chakra, and with it complete master over chakra can be obtained. I understand why only a few people would know about it given how much power it can give its user. However, how did it fall into our, and by that I mean mine, Naruto's, yours, Mother's, and the Yondaime's hands?" Hinata inquired in a direct manner. A voice interrupted the 2 teenagers, saying, "That young lady is a question that is better answered at another time." When the genin turned around and saw the pervert who had just caused them so much trouble, they both snarled in rage. The world famous Toad Sage was about to be torn apart when Naruto spied Hinata fall into a Hake stance and let his Junshu chakra flare. "Children, ease yourselves. Not only are you attack an iconic figure in not only Konoha but the world, you are also about to step into possibly the worst beating of your life," Heishi said. It should come as no surprise that Hinata got up from her position, unwilling to go against her father over something as unimportant as the pervert in front of her. But Naruto was a completely different matter. "I mean no disrespect Hyuga-san when I say, I don't give a damn if he was emperor of all the elemental countries. The man, no this pervert, has got to be taught a lesson and at least one that'll teach him not to peep on innocent women again." Naruto grinned wickedly. The blonde's hand was aching to pull out his Bakken and Kukagiri, the girl in his most valuable possession, but he refrained out of respect and self-control, at least in the Heishi office. Heishi calmly responded, secretly relishing the boy's banter that was strikingly similar to that of the blonde Hokage. "Do understand Uzumaki-san. I mean no disrespect when I say, this man could kick you inexperienced tail from coast to coast on the continent, for he is known as the only one to defeat Orochimaru in 1-on-1 combat as well as being the sensei to your father, the 4th, Heishi said. Still unable to recall the specifics of his battle with the Snake Sannin, Naruto retorted, defeating the Snake Freak, please. I have more than enough chakra to do that, and I would have if I hadn't gotten impatient. He recalled being surrounded by a strong feeling, going for the kill, and then turning black until he fought that aspect of himself. I doubt it, boy. Orochimaru was more than likely toying with you, and so what if you have more chakra than him? It's not like you can use it very well, not with all the chakra you have floating around this room. Oh, and about that you'd better stop. 'Cause I'm not gonna be the one to carry your chakra exhausted ass to the hospital just because you were stupid enough to waste all your chakra trying to intimidate me. Besides, you're not even doing that right. There's absolutely no killing intent in this whole sea of chakra, Jiraiya responded, looking at the child with an arrogant eyes. As there was now a very noticeable edge of ki into the boy's chakra, Jiraiya thought amusingly, if this child is even half of Minato's son, then he should be well over the deep end now. Oh really? You mustn't be that good of a Sannin if you can't see something this abnormal even if it's right in front of you. That chakra floating around is my Junshu chakra, and I've had it for as long as I can remember. I don't need to expel it as it's already there, and if I wanted to I could probably cut you into tiny pieces with just as much as a simple thought, Naruto bluffed, knowing that his elemental manipulation below that level. Jiraiya was well aware of it, but she did a great job of hiding it. The boy gives it the name Junshu chakra, which isn't as creative as Minato's, but it adequately describes it. Perhaps because Naruto's was activated so much earlier than his father's, it appears denser than Minato's. With a serious expression on his face the entire time, Jiraiya thought, hell, I don't even think Minato discovered his ability until he was a few years older than Naruto. Finally, Jiraiya made fun of the boy by asking, Naruto, are you sure you want to do that? I am a Sannin after all. With an angry huff, Naruto turned away from the enraged Sannin, seemingly realizing that Jiraiya was aware that he was bluffing. As politely as he could manage, Naruto asked, why is this guy here anyway, Hishi-san? He's a Sannin and has the Hokage's expressed permission to go everywhere and anywhere he is welcome, which includes the homes of his close friends. Jiraiya interrupted, giving Hishi a serious glance. They would discuss the situation's ambiguity in greater detail later. Quickly realizing that Jiraiya was telling the truth, the Hyuga head was able to convince his daughter and nephew. Does that include the bathhouse? Replied Naruto in a mocking tone. I'll have you know I am welcome in many bathhouses around the world, and when I grace them with my presence they don't stampede like wild animals or let annoying brats in, Jiraiya responded with a sarcastic tone. Naruto retorted, I'm guessing Konoha isn't one of these imaginary places then. Jiraiya 0. Naruto 1 score. With a perverted smile, Jiraiya said, whatever kid, believe what you want, but I'm going back to the spa. I have some more research to do, and walked away. He would be more than capable of anticipating their children's responses if he knew them half as well as he believed. We have to stop him. The two yelled to each other, Haku's waiting for us at the spa, and then ran off, leaving a laughing Hishi in their wake. Gazing at a photograph of his late wife, the Hyuga head reflected that Jiraiya always had a way of making people follow him. The idea of her always made him feel better, and gazing into her blue eyes and blonde hair seemed to calm the raging storm inside of him. You were correct, my love. Jiraiya did return in due course. I now only need to wait for Tsunade to return. Hishi grinned and returned to his paperwork. After 5 minutes. For the third time, Jiraiya said, look young lady, I'm only here to do research now. If you just let me pass I'll be happily along my way. His tolerance for the young brunette before him rapidly ebbing. Haku carefully eyed the man in front of her and threatened, you think I'm a fool? I saw what you were doing earlier. You're lucky I don't let Hokage in on your little research right now. On second thought I'm sure he'll be interested in knowing what you've been up to, she said. The way he carried himself made it clear that he was powerful, but he had a feeling that he could be trusted, even if she was demanding that she crush him because he was perverted. A recognizable voice called out from behind the white-haired sage, Haku-chan, please move away from that pervert. I don't want him near you. Naruto moved as swiftly as a kunai in front of Haku, forming a protective barrier between her and Jiraiya. He didn't even notice the older girl's face flushed from his actions. Naruto kept glaring at the Sannin without realizing that his actions were defensive and a little embarrassing, until the man felt compelled to give the boy something, even if it was a lie. Look, kid, I was just here to do research. See, research, Jiraiya asserted, shaking a few blank pieces of paper in front of him to support his statement. Jiraiya paled a little as the three in front of him clutched his final 3 pieces of affinity identifying paper, but he didn't realize how special the paper was until they were taken from him by the incredibly cunning Hyuga. It will be very expensive for me to purchase another set. Watching the 3 figure out what was written on them made Jiraiya cry and sighed. After Hinata made the suggestion, I can't read it. Maybe the ink is hidden and it needs chakra to reveal what it says. The 3 of them started to channel chakra into the paper. Haku's piece instantly turned to ice, as one might expect from a member of the Isu clan. This startled the girl a little, causing her to drop the fragile piece of chakra infused paper and break it. Both genin were unable to stop marveling at their own paper transformations after noticing the older Kunoichi's chakra's reaction on the paper a little too late. Hinata's paper crumpled violently before it started to moisten from each line, and she changed first because she was better at controlling her chakra and sorting it for the test. 2 components. As Jiraiya stared at the seemingly worthless piece of paper, she thought, and to be for one so young. Jiraiya heard a rip and turned to face Naruto. When he noticed that Naruto's paper was cut in half, he couldn't help but feel a little proud. Jiraiya, recalling his days with his biological son, was barely expecting Naruto's shattered pieces of paper, which were resting almost naively on the ground, to sprout 2 saplings. Ironically, the old man pulled a Hinata and passed out as too much information was thrown at him all at once. Naruto laughingly remarked, "I think ruining his notes may have killed him, girls," as he looked down at the sleeping Sannin. An elderly ninja was Jiraiya. Few people could claim to have seen as much of the shinobi world as he had at the elderly age of 50. Over the years, he had battled shinobi from every secret village, developed strength that only a cage could match, and witnessed marvels in the shinobi world that would cause even seasoned jonin to pause and gaze in complete awe. The strength of his village's Hokages was one of those wonders, and the Nidaime was the first that sprang to mind. The Nidaime was a cunning man who, like his elemental natures, could adapt to any circumstance, such as water, while simultaneously striking his adversaries with a lightning-fast vindication. In spite of everything, the Nidaime was a kind man, and one of his descendants inherited this kindness. That heir was the Hyuga heiress Hinata, whose voice was now waking Jiraiya from his slumber. Jiraiya snapped one eye open and looked at the 3 kids in front of him, 2 of whom were arguing in private. The young girl pushed the amulet back into Naruto's hands and argued, "Naruto, I can't take this. You have a match in a month and without it, over half of your arsenal will be useless to you." The blonde frowned down at the thing, as though he was trying to think of what to say. Jiraiya quickly realized that the blonde's forehead had worry lines that deepened ever so slightly, just like Minato's did whenever something particularly bothered him. "Hinata. Chan, this is all you have left of your mother. Yeah, I know this thing is half mine, but have you seen my face? I am a mirror image of my father, and if I do say so myself, just as handsome, but every time I look in the mirror I get to see him." Naruto responded with awe in his voice. The girl with the dark hair signed heavily before a smile appeared on her face. "Even though he always manages to cheer me up, I wish it didn't have to come to this. 2 kids fighting over what their parents left them." As she accepted the talisman, Hinata reflected, "I guess this wouldn't be the usual argument since we're both fighting to give one another our heirloom rather than fighting over who it belongs to." As if it carried some of her mother's intelligence, the pendant's eerie glow was more than enough to constantly remind her of his presence, even if it wasn't enough to divert her attention or attract an enemy's attention. At that moment, Hinata genuinely understood the significance of the pendant, and she embraced her cousin, not a brother, without hesitation. For a brief moment, Naruto was taken aback by the unexpected show of affection, but he returned the hug after Haku gave him a knowing smile, knowing that Hinata would accept it even if she didn't want to. Hinata whispered, "Thank you Naru-kun," into the blonde's jacket. He said, "You're welcome, Hina-chan," over the girl's ear, and they parted ways, prepared to tackle their next issue. "Now with that solved, I just have to figure how I'm going to defeat Neji. Guy. Sensei said that a high-speed taijutsu combo would be the best strategy, but currently I have neither the speed nor the technique to actually accomplish that. Plus Neji is a practitioner of Juken, and if sparring with Hinata's taught me anything, it's that getting close to a Juken user is damn near suicide," Naruto continued. He already knew exactly where he wanted to go, but he had no practical way to get there. Fortunately, though, the secrets to his success were not as far away as he had believed. "You forgot to mention that Neji is best Juken user to be ever seen in a century, and that he spars regularly with protege of one of the greatest taijutsu users to ever grace Konoha, Rock Lee, who is rumored to be almost as fast as his sensei." A whisper came from below. The teenagers stifled a sigh as they looked down to see Jiraiya lying comfortably, idly taking notes on his notepad. They had forgotten about the pervert who had been unconscious beneath them. To his undiscovered grandfather's chagrin, Naruto sarcastically said, Yeah, all that stuff is great, but it isn't helping me get any closer to my goal. And besides, how do you know so much, old man? Is stalking Genin another hobby of yours? Or are peeping and writing perverted novels the only ones?" Jiraiya joked mockingly, "Quiet Gaki, or I'll reconsider helping you with your predicament," and to his surprise, Naruto immediately stopped talking. He hated to admit it, but Jiraiya was a legendary Sannin, so he was at least qualified to train the blonde, who was in dire need of one. In addition, it took much more skill to know when to back off and return for more while still getting what you want, and it was more fun to poke fun at someone just enough to keep them on the verge of losing their temper than to make them blow up. Naruto mocked with thick sarcasm, "I'm all ears, oh mighty Sannin, your teaching methods alone should assure me my victory," which Jiraiya noticed. However, rather than losing his temper, the Toad Sage simply stood with pride, partly because the brat's remarks made him think of his son and partly because it irritated Naruto so much that his joke backfired. Jiraiya retorted, "You damn right Gaki, but knowing your stupidity you may even be able to mess this up even with my help," after Naruto had been flipped. Strangely enough, they were both unconsciously participating in the same game. The only difference is that neither of them recognized it. Unaware of the comparison he had just made with his father, Naruto yelled, "Yeah right arrow. Sannin. Let's just get on with the lesson. We're burning daylight here." More guts than he knew what to do with, perseverance, and hard work. Uzumaki Naruto was composed of those elements, and Namikaze Minato was composed of those elements as well. In addition to being father and son, they were also kindred spirits of varying ages. Before a smirk appeared on his face, Jiraiya's only thought was, "This kid is going to be great. He would see to that." The old man exclaimed, again, as the blonde went through several hand seals and began to perspire heavily. Only his Kenjutsu, Junshu Chakra, and Taijutsu remained after he lost his pentacle and, later, his Chakra Shaku. When facing the current best Leaf Genin and the previous year's Rookie of the Year, this combination is not a winning one. In order to compensate for the loss, Jiraiya brought him back into regular jutsu along with Hinata and Haku. Hinata preferred Juken and its variations over all other fighting styles, while Hake was the only one of the three skilled in creating hand seals. Naruto had ignored hand seals in favor of seal. Less ninjutsu. They weren't exactly up to par, but that was completely unacceptable with Sannin leading them. This wasn't to say they weren't skilled at regular jutsu. Jiraiya mockingly threw a handful of shuriken at his two lagging students and said, "Faster. You think an enemy will wait that long for you to finish a simple jutsu?" Even though they weren't aimed at them specifically, the flying stars had accomplished their goal of distracting the two, which led to their slipping on the water while walking and falling into the hot springs. The two soaking genin sprang up with a furious scream and gave Jiraiya their full attention. That had been his 10th time doing it. Naruto, obviously fed up with the Sannin's criticism, yelled, "Well, it is a C-ranked jutsu, you said it yourself. So how are you expecting us to finish the jutsu at the same time as you while you're standing on solid ground and we're forced to water walk?" Jiraiya said hesitantly, "Easily, you get better. What you brats don't seem to realize is I've been around the world. I seen so many places, and let me tell you kid you have it nice in Konoha." Naruto most likely had the worst life out of all the residents of the large village. Even the regular residents of that village might have thought that Naruto's life was a dream, but that was a far cry from what other Jinchuriki had to go through. "Really, I doubt you can image what I've been through," Naruto said glumly as he emerged from the spring. His words had a profound effect on both of them, but he refrained from yelling at Jiraiya because doing so would negate the significance of his argument. Jiraiya was aware that he was solely responsible for the reaction he had been provoking. But the Sannin didn't want to consider what he would do, much less how he would feel, if he allowed Naruto to go out into the world, into the conflict Konoha would soon face, and his grandson died. The last surviving Hayatan user gave Jiraiya a curious look. "No I can't, but there are millions in this world who have faced similar situations, and I'm positive there are 8 other people out there that could understand you perfectly," he said. Hinata and Naruto both somewhat understood what he was talking about, but they weren't ready to get into that just yet. As a result, the three continued their training in a stifling silence, with Jiraiya's remarks being more restrained and helpful and Naruto's scathing retorts appearing less lively and dull. Overall, the remainder of the session went on interminably until the Sannin said he had somewhere to go and departed without even a childish joke from Naruto. The three quickly abandoned the jutsu after losing the Sannin. Although they hadn't made much progress, after all, it was only the first day. That was the last thing on their minds as the three of them repeatedly reenacted the argument that had taken place between Jiraiya and Naruto just 2 hours prior. Unusually direct about the entire situation, Haku questioned, "So is anyone going to explain what happened or am I going to be left in the dark forever?" She had been giving clues throughout the training session, hoping that someone, Naruto, Hinata, or Jiraiya, would clarify what they meant when they said that Naruto had a difficult life, but nobody was willing to say anything. She assumed that the topic might have been extremely delicate, but Haku's curiosity was unabated for some reason. She seemed to need to know in order to assist Naruto, or at the very least, to attempt to dispel the gloomy aura that loomed over him like a cloud of rain. Haku-chan, it's very complicated. It's not that we don't want to tell you, but I'll explain myself. Hina-chan, Naruto interrupted, giving the girl a serious expression. Since Hinata had seen his incident in the forest with his darker half, he had long since come to the conclusion that she must have learned about Kyuubi. Neither of them understood, though, that the Kyuubi had been defeated and that a new, even more potent, entity had been sealed inside of him. Naruto gave each girl a serious look before beginning. What you're about to hear is a village secret, one that cannot be uttered under the penalty of death. Knowing that there was more to the story than what she could resolve, Hinata gave a serious nod. But now, Haku regretted ever asking. Not because she was afraid for her life. No, if she was concerned about Naruto and he got into trouble or worse, was executed because of her. She had no idea what she would do, though. Don't worry, Haku-chan. This is my secret and only the Hokage and I have the authority to tell it freely. 13 years ago, Fire Country was ravaged by its greatest enemy, the Kyuubi. My father, the fourth Hokage, sacrificed his life to power a seal that not only sent the Kyuubi's soul back to Makai, but left its power with might to ensure that it could never return, Naruto said. Since Hinata either pieced it together from past knowledge or saw it firsthand, she naturally absorbed the information without blinking. Although Naruto's power was nothing to laugh at, it was occasionally unnatural, which explained why. However, there was also the being for the forest, which made Hinata uncontrollably shiver at the thought of that miserable chakra. However, that did not leave marked as a pariah in my village. No one understood the fourth seal in detail, not even the Hokage, so when the council began to ask questions, well, Gigi.san couldn't give them anything other than the fourth's assurances that the seal was stable. Needless to say, it wasn't enough, and like I said before, I spent the first few years of my life in isolation. It wasn't until a murder attempt did Gigi.san step up my education, so I could better control my power and hopefully gain some of the villagers' trust. The plan worked about halfway. I gained partial control and partial acceptance, however I still have a long way to go until my goals are complete. Naruto finished reflecting on his accomplishments. He now had family and friends, but more importantly, he had people who recognized him for who he was rather than what he stood for. He is similar to me but also entirely different from me. He has managed to continue trying to be the same person in spite of all of his suffering. Haku pondered, is that something I can say I did? And let her question linger in her thoughts. She was aware that she had changed, but she could honestly say that these changes were positive. Haku smiled a little as she looked at the boy. No, a man. Who had made it all possible. She felt a wave of gratitude. She owed Naruto a great deal simply for being him, not just for being his friend. Jiraiya interrupted the Hokage from behind, saying, well, he's definitely like his mother. Normally, Shunshin would not allow one to enter the old warrior's office, but Jiraiya was no ordinary shinobi. Being proficient in both seals and sage jutsu, the Toad Sage found that breaking into the Hokage office was as easy as picking a lock. And you are definitely trying my nerves. Haven't I told you to at least knock, and by that I mean at least announce your presence, the Hokage grumbled. The two had always communicated best through nonsensical banter because neither of them was good at heart conversations, so it was normal for them to continue in this manner. Jiraiya's remark caused the Sarutobi head to look suspicious. Right, but that wouldn't be a problem if you weren't so old. I swear it's about time you picked a successor, he said. The Toad Hermit himself had been the most devastated by the fourth's passing, in part because he wasn't even present to help his son, but primarily because he knew that the fourth would still be alive today since he would have performed the Shikifuin himself. In response, the Hokage felt a chill creep into his bones. Strange words, but in a time like this I fear that they may hold more true than I wish to believe, he said. Such omens appeared all day long, but he would have to weather the storms that lay ahead for the benefit of his village. Otherwise, they would all perish in its apocalyptic wrath. Jiraiya joked, don't be such a downer, you old ape. You still have 5, maybe even 10 years left in you. Certainly enough to see that wily fireguard of a son of yours get married, and maybe even enough to see Naruto succeed you, as a few memories clouded his vision. I hope as much. That Yui girl has fine potential. I haven't seen anyone put Asuma in his place like that since his mother passed, and as for Naruto, he holds my highest hopes for Konoha's future, Sarutobi said with a grin plastered on his face for the first time in weeks. The Hokage felt as though a weight had finally been removed from his shoulders, and the warm thoughts seemed to thaw the cold in his bones. You have good reason too, the boy catches on quickly. I sure you already know if his Reiki, interesting name he choose for it too. Junshu Chakra, but I guess it makes sense from one point of view. But whatever you call it, one thing is evident, the kid's got talent, because from what he's told me he's had it activated since he was a child. A child? Minato didn't even activate his until he was 14. And even then it took him over a year to get half as good as Naruto is right now. Good thing too, because it took over another 2 years for Minato to complete that Urate reversing technique of his. Personally, I think with some effort Naruto can get it down to a usable level by the end of the month, Jiraiya said with a frown in his mind. Sarutobi cautioned, "You have a frightening amount of confidence in someone so young, Jiraiya. Try not to overload him, for you may alter his life forever," after recalling his traitorous student's memory. No need to tell me that, but I have the utmost faith in the kid's moral backbone. He is his father's son, by the way, but what's more, he takes after his mother and grandmother more than anything, Jiraiya laughed. That he is, he seems to take the worse in both of them too. He's stubborn as a mule and has a pranking streak as vast as the Hokage's monument. All things considered, that may be a good thing for Konoha, because someone as stubborn as that will never defect or give up, even if he pranks the hell out of all of us, the Hokage joked. You're telling me, but that's not what I meant. Well, not entirely. Naruto may have gotten all the bad of both Tsunade, Haim and Kushina Chan, but he also got their good as well. The boy picks things up like Kushina, possibly even faster, and he inherited the one thing Tsunade didn't get from her grandfather, Jiraiya added with a grin. You can't mean, as the Hokage sat reveling in shock at the secret he'd just been giving away. Jiraiya pondered, yes, the boy is a Mokuton user. Good thing too, considering all he relied on was his Reiki, Spirit Aura, and Kenjutsu. Oddly enough, he's aligned to Wind as well, but in a sense that would be the Minato in him just showing up in one more place. The Hokage murmured in a mysterious way, to think there was another right here in the village, before returning his focus to Jiraiya. This made all the difference because, if Naruto could master the powers of wood, the idea of a demon taking over Konoha during the Chunin exam might not seem so impossible after all. I know Minato wanted him to learn at his own pace, and he will, but at least set him in the right direction towards the Hiraishin, the Hokage said, staring Jiraiya in the eyes. Naruto needed to be at least schooled in the uses of Reiki. Yeah, I already planned on doing that, along with getting the boy up to speed with some standard ninjutsu and kenjutsu. I know Minato specifically stated not to let Naruto have the complete Hiraishin and Reiki scrolls until he was at least Chunin, but the boy was hardly a ninja when I started working with him. Plus his kenjutsu needs heavy refining. That Momochi character may have stamped out many flaws and drilled a swordsman's instinct into the boy's head, but he's nowhere near as competent as Minato was at his age, Jiraiya stated as he crossed his arms and sent a reproaching glare. The old monkey sage simply raised his hands in self-defense, somewhat placating the angry Sannin, not wanting the conversation to degenerate into an argument like it had the last time. Yes, I know his glaring lack of capabilities could have been easily fixed by myself when he was younger, but too much power and the boy may have been corrupted like Orochimaru was. That is a mistake one only has to make once, and I will not allow a man like Minato have his honor smeared because of my negligence to his child, replied the Hokage. Jiraiya physically released his tension in response to his words, which calmed the monkey man. Too true, but with the odds the boy will currently be facing, his shinobi education needs to be revamped, and as quickly as possible. I've already talked to Fukasaku and he's willing to help the boy recreate his kenjutsu style as well as help integrate it into that taijutsu style. Ninjutsu-wise we'll have to rush a bit and skip a few of the basic water, earth, and wind jutsu, but I'm confident Naruto will be able to pick up the slack with the help of some shadow clones. In the meanwhile, can you get Tenzo to give the boy a hand with learning wood jutsu? That man is the only other one capable of teaching Naruto, and the sooner he learns to control wood, the sooner we can form a plan to deal with this Shukaku threat. Jiraiya went on to say, any shinobi village would always be vulnerable during the Chunin exams, and with the enemies Konoha had made in recent years, an attack at this time would be advantageous for Orochimaru and his newly established village. I'll pull some strings with the Anbu department, however I've noticed both Haku and Hinata have found themselves under your wing. What do you have planned for those two young ladies as Naruto trains? Replied the Sandame. Sarutobi had to make sure they were prepared because he knew that this impending battle would be the biggest test the new generation of shinobi had yet to encounter. Haku is a competent medic, so I've already requested a B-rank mission for her to oversee the whole training process. However, after that I doubt she'll stick around any longer, seeing as she still has duties at the hospital. As for Hinata, I've already spoken with Heishi and he's agreed to let Hinata begin learning her mother's art, Jiraiya said, causing the Hokage to s-lungs. The Hokage retorted, wondering what the Sannin might think. Do you honestly think she's ready for that? Her mother didn't even start experimenting with natural chakra and its applications until she was well into teens, and even then she struggled with it as much as Minato did with his Reiki. But there was good reason for the Hokage's hesitation. If the wielder was not properly trained, Namikaze Umi's art was extremely lethal to both the victim and the user. She was able to use natural chakra, which is energy that is many times more powerful than human chakra, thanks to her power, which came from the very forces of nature surrounding her. The main sign of its strength was that, if the user so desired, the natural chakra could be seen once it was collected. With that level of power, Umi was able to create a completely new form of combat that would serve as a painful reminder of previous defeats for any nation that would be battling it. Stealing his resolve, Jiraiya explained, "I know the risks well, as will Hinata, but with this upcoming battle she will need as many advantages as she can get in order to survive." Even though the training might be risky, the elderly man had faith because his granddaughter was the only person who could complete it. The Hokage softly remarked, True, and I suppose me holding you here won't be helping with your current predicament," as he greeted Jiraiya. Jiraiya said, "I'm glad you understand," as he climbed out of the Hokage's window halfway. Jiraiya gave the man a final look and could see that the Hokage was concerned. The elderly monkey sage was concerned about each and every person who lived in his village, not just his grandchildren or the young shinobi of today. Having gained his students' respect for such a solemn duty, Jiraiya left the Hokage's office with the intention of lessening the man's load. "God damn it!" Naruto snarled angrily as his Bakken struck the air once more. Naruto chuckled bitterly as he escaped losing his head to an open palm strike, saying, "What a way to start off the morning." At the moment, his target, the elusive Hinata, was destroying him with her palm strikes, which were fortunately chakra free. But that didn't lessen the pain of her snapping blows, which oddly always ended up on his exposed jaw. Naruto thought, amusing himself with the image of a blushing Hinata and a glaring Kimimaro. Perhaps she's getting back at me for making fun of her precious Kimi-kun earlier. The blonde boy's arm went slack for a moment as the image was cut short by the sharp pain of 3 senbons slicing through his jacket and striking the shoulder of his sword arm. "Crap," was all Naruto could say before Hinata's hand struck his chin, knocking him back into one of the nearby ice mirrors. As Haku helped him stand up, Naruto thought that perhaps it was a bad idea to ask them both to spar at the same time. Her gentle smile relieved all of the tension. Since she was kicking the living daylights out of him, Naruto was unaware that he doubted he could have taken half the beating they were inflicting on him if it weren't for the girl's calm. Naruto said, "Thanks, I think," out loud, his private conclusion. Naruto's annoyance grew as he realized, somewhat belatedly, that he had lost even more quickly than in their previous battle. Zabuza, his regular Kenjutsu sensei, was away from the village on a special mission, so he had to improvise before the most crucial battle of his brief shinobi career. Considering that he would be facing the top rookie from the previous year and that he would only be using Tai and Kenjutsu, Naruto couldn't help but feel as though fate was working against him. Additionally, the odds were against the rookie because he was a Hyuga, a supposedly once.in a century genius. When he saw Hinata's distracted gaze, Naruto accidentally put his foot in his mouth and yelled, "This is so frustrating. I can't practice Kenjutsu properly, and there is no way in hell I'll be able to raise my taijutsu level high enough to even stand a chance against that long-haired prick, which leaves me with what ninjutsu?" Naruto chose to fume in silence rather than burden his cousin's conscience with additional guilt, knowing full well that she was blaming herself for his current situation. As he entered the clearing, Jiraiya thought, "It seems like you are having a difficult day. Perhaps I should return later." Naruto practiced Kenjutsu here a lot, judging by the numerous rivets and scars in the ground, but the boy still had a ways to go after his most recent demonstration of skill. Naruto said, "What now, Arrow? Sannin? I honestly don't have time to waste on impossible jutsu," as he was upset that he had not been able to master the Sweden jutsu previously. Whether he was C-class or not, Naruto had high expectations for himself, and considering how stressed he is right now, those expectations could cause him to lose it. Jiraiya's lighthearted banter annoyed Naruto even more. True, but from the looks of it you don't have much time to be wasting on anything," he said. With a menacing tone, Naruto nearly challenged the Sannin to ridicule him by asking, "And what's that supposed to mean, pervert?" "It means your opponent is going to wipe the floor with you if you continue with the way you are going. Something I doubt you, or your pride could stand, especially after making such a bold statement in the preliminaries," Jiraiya said dryly before avoiding Naruto's furious outburst. Jiraiya grabbed Naruto's wrists as he executed a follow-up swing with a swiftness that defied his appearance, pointing out crucially that the boy understood the fundamentals of Kenjutsu. Jiraiya said, Zabuza taught him well. Good, this should make Fukasaku's job a little easier, and take some stress off the schedule one had planned for the boy. He clearly caught the struggling boy's attention and put an end to all of his struggles by shooting a powerful dose of killing intent at him. As soon as Jiraiya left Naruto in his surprisingly firm grasp, he asked, "How do you know about that?" Before receiving a furious glare from Naruto, Jiraiya responded, "Why, it's the talk of the town. I hear there's a betting pool growing as we speak, this year dead last against last year Rookie of the Year, and not surprisingly you're the impossible long shot." Jiraiya smirked when a mischievous gleam appeared in his grandson's eyes, but he bit his tongue about the 100-to-1 odds. As he prepared to resume his training, Naruto added arrogantly, "So I guess I'll just have to prove them wrong, won't I? Hey Ero. Sanin, why don't you make yourself useful and help me make some money? And who knows, if I'm feeling generous I may let you in on my earnings." Well, it seems you aren't totally devoid of sense, but that's not going to help you defeat that Hyuga boy, because as it stands your only viable means of combat are his strongest areas. Couple that with the fact that he is a Hyuga, the best of his generation thus far, you are going to need a hell of a lot more skill and one foolproof battle strategy to even think about pulling off a win, Jiraiya said with an eyebrow raised at Naruto along with his two female companions. With a smirk on his face, Naruto questioned sarcastically, "And I'm guessing you have just what I need." Jiraiya smirked in response, matching his grandson's. "You're finally starting to think like a winner, aren't you?" he said. "Before we begin, however, Haku-san, you must understand what I'm about reveal are secrets, and as such their true inner workers need to remain that way," Jiraiya said, looking meaningfully at the calm woman. Haku nodded and promised to keep whatever it was the toad sage was about to show them secret, which made them all more eager to see what the sage had in store for them. The Sanin's chakra was far more refined than Naruto's, which sat in the air like an invisible cloud, but Jiraiya's was much less outreaching. Jiraiya evidently tensed as a wave of chakra flowed out of his body and saturated the area, much like Naruto's own chakra did. Jiraiya's chakra seemed to filter into the earth, making the rich soil beneath them hum with life. "Old man, what are you doing? Or are you attempting to replicate my Junshu chakra?" Curious, Naruto asked. With apparent effort, Jiraiya said, "Yes and no, because you see your Junshu chakra is actually an unrefined version of the fourth's Reiki which I am showing you now, as the stress of maintaining the chakra field started to wear him down." Beneath the toad Sanin, the ground moaned softly before separating, leaving behind a purplish fluid. With a poison moat separating them from the Sanin, Naruto, Hinata, and Haku watched in morbid fascination as the miasmic substance literally dissolved the loose pieces of earth. Naruto stumbled upon the unfamiliar term and exclaimed, "WH. What was that? There's no way that's what the real application of Junshu, or Reiki is." Despite his slight attachment to the name he had given his power, Naruto gave in to the realization that the technique wasn't his own and should be referred to by its correct name. As he watched the final remnants of green earth being consumed in front of his eyes, Naruto remarked wryly that it might also be related to the fourth's personal technique. "No, this here is the Jutsu Doden. Yomi Numa, Earth Release. Swamp of the Underworld. Another technique I'll be teaching you later, Reiki, the method in which I used that technique," Jiraiya explained to the three of them. With Reiki, Jutsu could be performed without the need for hand seals. The three were completely taken aback by that realization as the technique's actual ramifications became apparent. Being able to use Jutsu without hand seals gave one a significant advantage over an opponent because, in addition to saving execution time, it was also highly unpredictable and therefore extremely lethal. "I see you realized what actually happened, and yes, you are correct, the Reiki allows the user to seamlessly perform Jutsu, which as you realized is a godsend for any shinobi. However, that particular ability only works with Jutsu the user has explicitly mastered, for the user still has to mold the chakra, albeit via the chakra surrounding them rather than their hands. However, this is where the Kage Bunshin comes in." Jiraiya went on to explain the effectiveness of this combination. It would be as though the real user spent days on end practicing just one jutsu if 100 clones spent a little over an hour learning every facet of it. There was plenty of time to master the chakra mechanics of the majority of the techniques, but this put the battle usage and overall experience on the back burner. However, when weighed against the advantages, the disadvantages seemed more than reasonable. Naruto exclaimed in amazement as his mental image caught a glimpse of the kind of man his father was. "Incredible," everyone said. "Dad. I mean, the Yondaime was a genius. But this far outstrips anything I could have thought of doing," he said. "Yes, but the reason it was so effective was because it was such a closely guarded secret. The whole world knew about the fourth's unbeatable Hiraishin and Rasengan combination and planned out whole strategies around countering those single techniques. Minato.kun knew this and merely set a trap around their trap, and by using their intel against them, hordes of enemies ran into their demise because they were too caught up trying to defend against one technique when an entirely different one was poised to take their life, Jiraiya said, slightly stuttering as he by his maiden name. There was an incalculable amount of pride and love in Jiraiya's voice, and even after all this time, the Toad Sage still had a place in his heart for his blonde son. Curious about how the renowned Yellow Flash countered techniques in his own village, Hinata questioned, amazing, but what happens if someone were to see through the jutsu? Like a Sharingan or Byakugan user? Although he wouldn't have to, it was well known that, aside from the Hokage, the Yondaime was the strongest person in the village in his later years. For the Sharingan, the fourth used an advanced form of the Shunshin, body flicker, which he called Shunpo, flash steps. Basically, the fourth streamlined his version that it worked instantaneously within his Reiki, while at the same time cleaning it up so much that any residual chakra that the Sharingan could use it to track him was hidden within the chakra that cloaked the area, Jiraiya disclosed, causing the child's eyes to widen though in different ways. All three of them studied the Sharingan extensively. Haku because of her most recent mission with Zabuza, Hinata because of the Hyuga's affiliation with the Uchiha, and Naruto because of his fierce rivalry with Sasuke. One conclusion emerged from all of their research. The secret to defeating the Sharingan was to avoid its sight. Naruto's father, the Yondaime, had accomplished that in some way, and Naruto also had the means to accomplish the same. Despite his reservations, Jiraiya said, as for the Hyuga, the fourth realized despite the misgivings the best way to completely beat a Hyuga was by going head to head, maintaining a straight face in front of everyone else. Then there was a chorus of disbelieving voices, and only when the Sannin threatened to read his novel did the three become silent long enough for Jiraiya to complete his explanation. Yes, I thought the same, but his logic behind it was like this. The Hyuga spend all their time perfecting their taijutsu, which is true for the most part. So by trumping their strongest tool, he figured they were basically defeated, Jiraiya explained, which led the three to reconsider. Hinata retorted, easier said than done. Juken is legendary around the world, and is claimed to be one of the oldest and strongest taijutsu styles of all the elemental countries, her rigorous family education producing its elegant, dignified, but remarkably conceited head. Yes, true, but not only was the fourth as the home of Juken, a place where he could spar against the style without fear of being killed, but his sister was dating the best Juken user of his generation. There were many of days where Minato and Heishi would be battling it out, both working to perfect their own taijutsu style. From those workouts the fourth came up with Urate, reversing, which is basically his anti-Juken technique. Urate is quite simple, for it simply does what the name implies and reverse the flow of the Reiki. However, in doing so two very important things occur. One being that the user's speed, power, and chakra pressure all skyrocket, and two, the user's tenketsu become virtually unsealable. Jiraiya finished, and unsurprisingly he found the three in shock once more. Unsealable, to do that, the fourth's tenketsu would have to be, Hinata began as the meaning solidified. Always brimmed with chakra, and they were because he was reversing the flow of his chakra, basically reabsorbing his overflowing chakra and thus becoming surprisingly more efficient. The only downfall was his chakra control fluctuates with the change, so techniques were harder to pull while using Urate, the Jiraiya, which was completed prior to Naruto. This was his solution to his present problem. With the Reiki, he would not only be able to fill in the gaps in his ninjutsu and taijutsu that he had experienced throughout his shinobi career, but he would also be able to solve his problem of how to approach his match against Neji. The only question that remained was whether he would be able to catch up in time for the Chunin exam. Naruto asked, his smile turning feral at the challenge, so when do I start? Although a month might not seem like much, he intended to make the most of it. Jiraiya responded, now, and then channeled some of his chakra into a summoning jutsu. Both Jiraiya and the creature he had summoned were hidden from view by a smoke eruption, and the ground surrounding him was covered in the distinctive marks of summoning kanji. A wise voice bickered, clearly upset at his sudden house call. Jiraiya-chan, what have I said about calling me without telling me beforehand? I have half a mind to reverse summon you at seemingly random times, just to see how you like it, the voice said. Yeah, I know I'm supposed to call ahead, but for the record I don't think you won't be too displeased with the reason I called you out here, Jiraiya said sheepishly. The young listeners found it extremely unsettling to hear someone with Jiraiya's stature and strength treated like a green-eared genin. To make matters worse, it was a summons, which only added to the strange things the three had experienced. The situation only became more bizarre when the three of them saw the summon, which was about halfway up to their shins. I originally believed that summons were meant to obey their summoner. What could possibly be that great that I, Minato.kun, the toad said, stopping halfway through, his mouth gaping as wide as the children's incredulous gaze. The blonde in front of him was a perfect replica of his last disciple, so it seemed as though he was looking into his past from the small toad. Jiraiya kindly corrected, "No Fukasaku, that is Minato. Kun's son, Uzumaki Naruto," encouraged by the boy's incredulous expression. Like the other members of the Toad clan, Fukasaku had become attached to the blonde Hokage despite the fact that they had only been training for a few weeks. But for the older amphibian, learning that their beloved summoner had a child without telling him was like a kick in the face. Fukasaku started to say, "Why wasn't I told that he of all people had a child? You know the prophecy as well as I do, Jiraiya," but was cut off by the Toad Sanin's piercing gaze. The sage Toad realized then that Jiraiya had been unaware of this fact, which was likely eating at the Sanin as they conversed. The Toad clan's little Jiraiya Chan was demonstrating his age and experience and demanding the respect he deserved, and Fukasaku kept that fact in the back of his mind as he gazed back at the shinobi with an appraising eye. Idly observing that a single look, free of any murderous intent or similar glitz, was sufficient to evoke that kind of respect in him, and from that, Fukasaku realized how serious the situation was. Knowing that the genin listening nearby wouldn't understand his ambiguous question, Fukasaku said in a hushed tone, "He doesn't know, does he, Jiraiya? You didn't know either, right?" Before receiving a nod from Sage Summon, Jiraiya clarified, "No, to both of them, but for the time being we'll have to work around that and merely get him ready for the future." Fukasaku turned his evaluative eyes to the blonde who was looking on, and a smile appeared on his face. It was going to be enjoyable. The little toad went on to explain, "So Naruto, I am Fukasaku as little Jiraiya said before, elder to the Toad clan of summons and will be teaching the ways of Gomakin, Frog Fist," before the blonde burst out laughing. Naruto made a loud joke that embarrassed everyone around him. "You are going to teach me? What, how to not get eaten by things, or how about how to avoid getting my ass stomped on?" he exclaimed. Both Hinata and Haku were interested in how Fukasaku could instruct the blonde considering their current size disparity, despite their evident tact regarding the matter. With a cool response, Fukasaku looked daringly at the now angry Naruto and said, "You definitely don't have your father's sense of poise, but I guess not everyone can take after him, otherwise the world would be far too talented of a place for the likes of you. I guess you took after your tomboy mother, for you certainly get your manners from her," Fukasaku said. Without waiting for an explanation or apology, the blonde threw himself at the toad. Given the creature's small size, he found this task difficult, but in a show of skill belying his age or size, Fukasaku blocked Naruto's incoming fist with his wooden cane concealed by his cape before cleanly tripping the boy up with the aforementioned staff. After tumbling across the harsh ground and landing in an undignified heap, Naruto simply snarled, "Lucky shot," and charged the toad once more, this time astonished that the elderly amphibian also launched an offensive. With one hand blocking Naruto's incoming fist and the other cocked back, Fukasaku sent a haymaker that would have made even Tsunade envious straight into Naruto's bare jaw. Naruto ended up flat on his back, staring up at a rather perplexed toad after both of his female companions gave him a nasty crunch and a pitying wince. "Haven't had that much fun since meeting your father. Albeit he took his beating with a bit less dignity, seeing as I used the same taunt Kushina speech on him as well, who was for the record a kind and beautiful young lady despite her blunt personality. Yes, she was a firecracker, that one. Perfect suit for the stiff like your father, but enough on them. Do you now understand the strength of Gomakin?" Fukasaku pondered intently, and then gave it to Naruto. The blonde knew he would be speaking to the little toad for a while after that final blow. The Sannin was startled out of his laughter when Fukasaku said, "Good, because you're going to need all of your Reiki to master it, but before we start, Jiraiya, don't you think it's time to get Hinata Chan started on her training as well?" Jiraiya jeered, receiving a chilly glare from his defeated pupil. "Right, I completely forgot about that. I guess watching Naruto take a beating like his father was too funny for me to miss," he said. Jiraiya looked at his other grandchild and mentally readied himself for the speech he was about to deliver, ignoring the stare without even flinching. Hinata's training would definitely be more lethal than Naruto's, despite being less varied. However, this training would only be the beginning for the girl if she were like her mother. "Hinata, I know you are wondering what Fukasaku could have meant by your training as well. So to be blunt, your mother was much more than the kind housewife that you'd known her as during her time alive with you. No Namikaze Umi had earned a reputation as fierce if not fierce than her legendary brother and was heralded as the Kuinchi. 1. Or Priestess of Destruction. Which in the cloud is a name held in as much fear and respect as her brother's is in the stone, Jiraiya said with an unmistakable air of affection in his tone. Although Minato was his pride and son, Umi was his daughter and his love, and whenever he talked about her, his feelings were always intense. In actuality, his final connections to the village were broken by her passing and the implied loss of his granddaughter. He had only gone back because he was obligated to the old man, a choice he was growing increasingly grateful for. Yes, he was more than justified in returning to Konoha after gazing into his granddaughter's amazed eyes while he described the wonders her mother had achieved. No one had ever told me about my mother before. Even Oto Sama couldn't say more than a few words without getting lost in his past. However, why is it now that I am learning about all of this? Why not before when I was struggling? Why not after the cloud's attempt on my life? Had I known my mother was this, the famed Kuinchi, I would have been able to draw more confidence for myself, Hinata snapped. Even though her response was very different from her usual behavior, the Sannin anticipated it. He had reacted similarly when he learned that his children were Umi and Minato, and he had done the same when he learned that his grandchild Hinata was still living. He may have been reluctant to tell Hinata about her mother because of that odd resemblance that bound them together. Because he had given Hinata a lot of her attitude, whether anyone wanted to acknowledge it or not. Unaware that his cursed perversion had already infected his poor granddaughter, and that poor Kimimaro never had a chance, Jiraiya muttered absently, hopefully she won't go chasing Bishonen like her mother was when she was her age. Jiraiya thought bitterly about having to call himself a stranger to his own granddaughter, but that dark inkling was quickly overridden with relief when Hinata dropped the subject for the time being. I could tell you that it was because you weren't ready, or maybe that the knowledge would damage who you were. However, the truth is there is no excuse, you deserve to know who your mother was, and learning it from a stranger probably wasn't the best way to find out. However, instead of mulling over the past, how about we put what your mother left you somewhat useful? She was her mother's child, compassionate and kind but also resolute when pushed. It appears that this entire situation had caused her to spend a considerable amount of time talking to some significant others in her life. Jiraiya took a scroll out of his jacket and took her silence as a yes. Here, this belongs to you. And to save you the trouble of having to open it just to find out what exactly made your mother so strong, I'll tell you now. Her mother drew from the very world around her, channeling that natural chakra into the very pentacle you hold in your hand. The process in which she did it was incredibly dangerous, because any miscalculation with the natural chakra and she could have corroded her body into dust because of the backlash. However, it was because of her control, awe-worthy even by Hyuga standards, that she was able to channel the world's chakra, an energy being roughly 100 times more potent than human chakra. From here she could use it for a variety of things, however your mother found it to be most effective if used like Juken, thus your father comes in. With his help Umi was mold the chakra into a deadly style that molded the chakra into deadly arrows to pierce an opponent's body. Jiraiya uttered, leaving out that while all that was happening the two slowly fell for one another. The fact that his daughter fell in love with a boy whose fan club was so much better than Uchiha Sasuke's warmed and saddened the old Sannin. The tail chasing gene that Umi and later Hinata inherited from him was only reinforced by this little known fact, which neither he nor Umi particularly liked once they began dating. After a moment, Hinata muttered, "So how do I start?" unaware of her relationship to the man in front of her. Jiraiya gave a cryptic response before a smile appeared on his face. "It's rather simple really. You just have to be able to sit completely still," he said. Hinata would have had no trouble mastering this training if she were anything like Umi, but only after having her first apocalyptic fit, a quality that her maternal grandmother had instilled in her. He was right when he said that after no more than 20 minutes, Hinata's normally composed demeanor started to gradually become increasingly irritated by the difficulty of her workout. The irate Kunoichi failed to sense even the smallest amount of the energy she was supposed to be harnessing, despite the fact that gathering natural energies was the first step to synergizing Sage Chakra, something even seasoned Jonin wouldn't attempt. "Alright, take deep breaths." The scroll stated that total focus must be attained in order to. Hinata began, but she quickly lost focus once more. Curiosity was the one flaw that all people shared. It was normal for the mind to wander, and even the eternally calm Hyuga heiress found it extremely difficult to achieve total stillness in her body, mind, and spirit. But that fact didn't stop her growing annoyance, so she gritted her teeth and continued, unsure of how much longer she could tolerate it. Jiraiya laughed at the scene and assumed there was some hope for the girl because she hadn't yet vented her rage on anything inanimate, but judging by the increasing number of pulsing tick marks on her forehead, that could change in a few seconds. With that in mind, the Toad Sannin approached the final of the three young people, her training firmly in the forefront of his thoughts. After Jiraiya began, Haku.san, now that you are aware of these two's training, I must ask you one thing. The dark-haired woman bowed deeply in front of him. His trust in her, along with Naruto's and Hinata's, was one of her most valuable possessions, and as a result, she greatly respected him for the trust he placed in her. Haku said solemnly, no one will know of this Jiraiya. Sama, you have my word as a kunoichi, ready to die with the knowledge she had been given. As the manipulating mistress gazed up at him with a shocked expression, Jiraiya said bewilderedly, your secrecy is appreciated, but that's not what I was going to ask. All I need to you is to act as a standby medical attendant for these two's training, which is mainly to make sure Naruto doesn't get too bruised up by Fukasaku and that Hinata does end up breaking anything when she finally snaps. Of course you will be paid for your work and credited with a B-rank training mission, and I've made arrangements with the hospital about the work and training you'll be missing. So don't worry about that, all the reading you will need to have done will be brought to you, and your scheduled shifts have been made to fit your mission, Jiraiya clarified, knowing that the girl intended to show up anyway. In this manner, rather than exhausting herself trying to be here and at the hospital, she would be able to do something useful as well. Haku cheerfully replied, thank you Jiraiya. Sama, I accept your mission, as she stood up again and walked back to the two training genins' side. Jiraiya also vanished after the girl left, leaving the genin to work so he could concentrate on other, more significant matters. Before entering the red light district of Konoha, Jiraiya thought, I think I have the perfect place. Now I just need to do some research.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.